Just because you're wealthy doesn't mean you don't have problems,
Yeah.
but you're not tuned into the bigger systemic problems and policy issues that are crushing the lower class because you never felt those policy issues. And your job is to highlight what these policy issues are to try and get some, extrinsic motivation to start making better changes. And it's just not happening.
So Will, welcome to Thought
Here,
Criminals.
finally, huh?
Finally here. We're doing it's been really interesting kicking it with everybody. Like me, you, Chris Williamson, just the guys from Unheard.
Yeah.
Rebel Wisdom, Colin Wright.
Yeah.
I mean, it feels like, and it's funny because it's definitely appropriate because we're on Thought Criminals. Like it feels like we're all in this really weird position. And then we were also in a room with 500 or so other people, mostly academics, which was okay. I mean, it was fine. I would like to have seen it broad.
It's a little dry.
A little dry, a little narrow focus, but that's fine. But being around a bunch of people who have the same thought, I thought there was goods and bads about it. Like if I'm being really critical about what was going on, there is this kind of essence of victimhood that goes on in like the heterodox world. It's almost, we talked about this last night, and I don't want to be critical of Brett and Eric Weinstein and maybe Jordan Peterson. We're going to get into a lot of these things, but there is this kind of, I think that victimhood is alluring, right? It's like a very safe place to be. And the people that seem to rail on victimhood the most are also seem to be captivated by it in a certain way. It's very strange. I've noticed that we were having conversations. It's like people who really enjoy all of these thinkers or whatever being kind of stuck in like, why do they choose to do that fucking thing of all things?
They're choosing to push back really hard on like mainstream narratives. And then when the mainstream narrative comes after them, they're like, oh, they're coming after me. Like, you're playing this game. You know the game you're playing. Yeah. Like, don't be surprised.
Well, even we were with Chris Williamson last night and he was like, I was talking about my experience online, right? Super great guy. He's like, man, you've got like a knack for getting canceled. And I was like, no, I've never been canceled. Canceled is a mob. I've been censored and I say wild shit. So I'm going to get censored. You know what I mean? It's like, I'm not surprised that I'm being censored by a big tech platform that really doesn't love what I have to say. But that's different to me than being canceled. I think canceled gets like used in all these different ways. I'm like, I don't think I'm not big enough for anybody to really give a shit.
How have you been? So you've been like shadow banned
on Instagram,
demonetized.
I had monetization access on YouTube, and then I got a content strike for repurposing a video that was already on YouTube. For my own stuff, which is very strange. TikTok's banned me twice, and I was cruising on that. I mean, I was going to 1 million followers. I was just hauling ass. I mean, I couldn't put a video up that didn't get 60,000 views. I had 3.5 or 5.1 or 6.1, something like that, million views on my first video I ever posted from Politically Homeless on there. It was actually called Connor Wanders at the time. So like, and I think what actually happened, oddly enough, and this is just my hypothesis, is that I had got a lot of Trump supporters on my side because I was ripping on Biden, and they assumed that I was conservative, and then I ripped on some conservatives during the very early days of COVID, and I think a lot of them reported me.
So you think it was going after both sides? Because for me, I got shadow banned, and it wasn't racial stuff. It wasn't even political stuff. It was the COVID stuff. That's what hit worse than anything for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right. I mean, I think that. And I tried to even like watch myself, but it's just not in my nature to do that at all. Yeah,
why are we doing this? Exactly. I mean, it makes me. It definitely has that element of like, oh, well, now I want to lean in more.
Exactly, and I can see how someone who all of a sudden like these, and I think I don't remember who was saying this last night. Was talking about these people that I respect, right? Like I respect Jordan Peterson, I respect the Weinstein brothers, Barry Weiss. Like I respect these people, Glenn Greenwald, these different variety of people, right? But at the same time, and I don't think that Glenn does this as much, a little bit. Matt doesn't do it at all. But these other, like, they were journalists before. And so they had opinions that were public, and they've taken backlash for that. And it was like a slow degradation. They had taken backlash for maybe, let's just use Glenn Greenwald as an example, like the Hillary Clinton leaked emails, WikiLeaks, all this stuff, right? Snowden. And so his defense of that, he had kind of like calloused himself to take criticism. Whereas someone like Peterson became famous overnight. And I don't know if he knew how to handle the shit. Yeah. I just think it kind of, and having loving the dude, and the same thing with the Weinstein brothers. It's like, you know what game you're playing here. I have zero doubt that people will love me or hate me. And that is 1000% okay. Some of the best advice I ever got in my life was from my first boss. His name was Jeremy Teal at CrossFit Central. He goes, I like you because people have to make a fucking decision about you. They either love you or they hate you.
They're not indifferent.
And that's good. Yeah. And no one is ever indifferent about you. And he goes, that's good for business. And I was like, it is good for business. And I actually, I embodied that. You know, it was some of the best advice I've ever gotten in my life as a 22-year-old.
Well, it's good for media too. If you look at like Howard Stern or someone like that, that's how he built his bones. You know, in the movie, they're like, the average Howard Stern lover, you know, listens for 40 minutes. What about the haters? They listen for an hour and a half.
Yeah.
You know, just like, I mean, or Floyd Mayweather in boxing. It's like, how do I get people to watch? Because they want to see me get knocked out.
Conor McGregor, same deal.
Yeah. You piss people off.
You rile people up. And you know, when we talk about all this, like getting into all of this stuff, it's like, you're just like going through the fucking woods with a machete. It's trying to like figure out which way am I going to go here? It's complicated and it's nuanced. And I think one of the things I really appreciate is when people are unpredictable with their takes. Yeah. You know?
Well, what are we? Because like,
I don't know.
That's the thing. I went back to the hotel then after we were out with this crew last night, and my wife was like, so I was trying to talk to my friends about this conference and about you guys. Like, she's like, what is it? Like, there's journalists and there's college professors and there's media people. And then I'm a high school teacher. Like, what? Podcasters, but then some people don't listen to podcasts at all. Some people embrace social media. Some people say social media is the devil. Yeah. But yet we all have this one thing in common where we're like truth seekers, or I don't know what it is.
I don't know what it is. And I think I think there's a level, like it's curious people who are disgruntled with the way things are, where things are headed. I mean, let's look at like the last couple of days, the two panels that I enjoyed the most. Who was on this one today? It was
Glenn Lowry and John McWhorter and Eric Smith.
Yeah, which was great, right? So the economists and these like thinkers, very like tenured professors type of people, right? And then yesterday we had Unger Sargon, who's a Marxist journalist who set the fucking thing on fire.
Yeah,
and it was incredible. And it was like, how often do those people all have a similar motivation?
Yeah. National Review was on one side and Vox is on the other.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was, and then Science Magazine.
Exactly.
And then Batya from, I don't know, Newsweek. Yeah. So it's great. But like we all have that one thing in common and we disagree. So there's conservatives and there's liberals and there's progressives and there's Marxists and all this stuff. But we all have this one thing in common, but it's hard to put us in a box. That's why I think initially it was the IDW, Intellectual Dark Web. And that like concept stuck with me. But that's kind of fizzled out, that kind of concept. So I don't know if we need a title, if we're going to need a grouping, but it's just an interesting thing.
But even within and that's the thing, the intellectual dark web is kind of the canary in the coal mine, right? Because those guys had a variety of different views on how the world should be done. I mean, if you look at, some people were the same, like Sam Harris. It was Douglas Murray considered part of that too.
I don't know. Maybe it's before that. Yeah, it was
maybe it's like they had similar, but it's like you could get in there and it was like there was some vastly different views on what was going on, but they had. And this is where I get when it comes to politics and our current like worldview. I think it's good if we can agree on what the problems are, right? If we can agree, we can have very different. You can be a libertarian and a Marxist and agree on what the issues are. Your solutions will be wildly different. Yeah. But if you have the commonality of agreeing what the problems are, then you have somewhere to go. Whereas now we can't even like, there's a small piece, and this was one thing they highlighted a lot was how small that like wild radical left or whatever you want to call it, whatever Ben Shapiro would call it, right? That community is it's like 6% of the population. Batya said that. And it's like true, you don't have to cater to them. But I think if you can get to a place where if you think that the underlying problem of all of America's issues is systemic racism, you don't really have what do we have to agree on? We have nothing to agree on because we're not even like of course I think systemic racism exists and things have happened and there's lingering effects of overtly racist laws. There's still overtly racist laws and policies that are, and now there's less of them. Like we could just now people that don't want to say that it doesn't exist. I'm like, well, why does crack have a 10x penalty to cocaine? Yeah, that's a racist law, straightforward. So that like just by that law existing, systemic racism de facto exists, and we don't have to get any more complicated than that to expose that. But if you can't even see the problems as the same, then you have no way to communicate about solutions. And it stresses me out kind of.
Well, if you don't have one thing in common, then you have nothing. Then you have nothing to align with this person with. Like you can disagree on a million things, but you got to find one thing that you do agree with. Cory Booker, I actually was a fan of his when he was in New Jersey. He was the mayor of Newark, and he was in a conservative state at the time. It was under Chris Christie, and he would go and have meetings with Chris Christie because he was the mayor of the biggest city. And Chris Christie was the governor of the state of New Jersey, and his people would say like, "Oh, you better give it to Chris Christie. Go after him hard." He's like, "Look, I disagree with him on 1,000 things. We agree on about 5 things. I'm going to focus on those 5 things." Yeah. Because then we're not going to get anywhere if we just talk about we're just going to be fighting. But instead of being like like this. We just have to go shoulder to shoulder. Come on, let's walk towards trying to solve this problem. We'll disagree on how to do it. But yeah, I mean, we have to agree on those. I'm with you.
And that's the thing. I said this I was on JP Sears' podcast, but he never released it. Spoiler alert. But I don't know why. I guess. But it was an odd situation. But I said libertarians and socialists actually have a lot in common.
Right.
A lot in common. Now, they agree upon the issues, right? So let's talk about drug legalization, right? Especially marijuana. Yeah,
that's a huge one for me.
War, right? The military industrial, there's a lot of commonalities. Yeah. Of course, your economic principles are quite different. And maybe the reasons that you think war is bad is different, but you have a substantial amount of alignment. And to me, I even said this, I think I had something to think about on the show on Politically Homeless about this, is like, we need more libertarians and socialists in government, like actual, not Bernie Sanders, like actual socialists and actual libertarians. Yeah. So I want to see them argue about shit, because somewhere in between their two ideologies, you get to circumvent neoliberals and neoconservatives. Like they don't even, they're not even playing the same game. Yeah. Right. And I think that's something that's really, really fun to even think about, because you have two extremes in a way, especially within our political system now, that might actually be able to like come together and be like, and have some really unique ideas. They could get over their own bullshit and their own ego to make that happen. And so much of it is ego driven too, you know?
For sure. Yeah, the war on drugs is such an interesting one, because that one seems so clear to me as a bad idea. And you go back to like John Ehrlichman under Nixon was like, this is our way to lock up black people and stuff like that. So if you talk about systemic racism, I've gotten into it with a lot of like critical race theory, because I'm in education. So it's like a big thing. And when I bring that up to these critical race theory people, they're like, no. I was like, what do you mean? No, this is perfect. You're talking about systemic racism in a way that's not racism on its front. It's exactly, I've read these critical race theory books. This is it. And they're like, no. That's just one thing. You got to tear it all down. As opposed to like, this is an area where liberals, conservatives, the extremes, we can all agree on this, but it's not happening. The drug policy in this country is so strange to me.
It makes no sense.
Yeah. And hopefully our kids will be able to live in a country where it's not the way it is now. But Carl Hart, Drug Use for Grownups, a great book. And he's done more research on drugs on people than anyone else. He's like the head of neuropharmacology at Columbia. And he's like, we should be running these drug laws based on science, not just based on the way that it feels. And all of the way the drug laws work now is the way that it feels. It's not based on the science of what these chemicals do at all.
No, not at all. Not at all. And that's especially when you got stage 3 clinical trials on, I mean, the mandatory minimums, that's what gets me weird too, is like the mandatory minimums with LSD, right? Is 7 years. 7 years. You could go rape someone and not get 7 years in prison. But if I'm in possession of one hit of LSD, the mandatory minimum of 7 years. That's insane.
Correct me if I'm wrong. It's not neurotoxic either, right?
No, it's neuroregenerative.
That's so what's the argument you can have when you can't even overdose? You can want to die, but like you can't die from it when you can die from eating too much salt. Like there's no logical reason. It actually goes into,
I can buy enough vodka to kill myself with like $8
easily. Yeah, I know.
Even with inflation.
One of the things that John Haidt talks about, because we were just at this heterodox thing, is in his books. He gives a whole bunch of rationale for why people support these ideas that they do, and it's not always through logic or reason. And one of the ones that he does in the book that's really silly but is interesting is like, you take a rotisserie chicken, you put on a condom, and you have sex with it. Is it wrong to eat that chicken?
Yeah.
Okay. And people go, yes, it's wrong. It's disgusting. It brings up that disgust element of your moral foundations. But you can't logic your way through it. Yeah. It's not because it's unhealthy. It's not because it's just gross, and you can't really know why. And it feels like there's a lot of that within drug policy. Yeah. It's like, this is wrong. Taking a bump of cocaine is way worse than having 3 shots of espresso. Yeah. Why? Like, chemically, why? They're like, why? And they don't get there. It's just like, well, because it's just the way it is. I talked to a barista one time at Starbucks. I was like, if my 7-year-old walked in and asked for 4 shots of espresso, would you sell them? She's like, yeah. Like, that's
not a good idea. Yeah. Yeah, right?
It's interesting.
It is interesting. And it's like, there's a moral argument. It's like the quote about porn. Like, I can't define porn, but you know when you see it.
Yeah.
And that's the thing with so much of this stuff. It's just so odd. It's like, can you not have 1 ounce of curiosity? And I actually, having had a little bit of a discussion with John Haidt, I wasn't that impressed. I mean, I liked his book, and I've read a lot of his stuff, and it's good. But it was like I feel like he was also blinded by the idiocy of the left. Yeah. And I'm like, you understand you're giving idiots on the right a pass. Correct. Like, this is what the whole kind of premise behind Politically Homeless and even Thought Criminals is like, I'm not giving stupid people a pass that are making decisions regardless of where they are on the political spectrum. I don't give a shit if they are in alignment with me and they're doing dumb shit. Like, I'm going to call that out as well. And it's not great for making friends, but I have zero interest in giving, he was talking about he was talking about young girls on social media that go through adolescence on social media from left-wing households are having a harder time than conservative girls in the same situation. And I'm like, with dating and growing into mature relationships. And I was like, that is such a, I really want to read what he has to write about that because I want to give him the benefit of the doubt. But I'm like, I grew up in a very conservative community. And my parents didn't push religion on me too much. It wasn't like that. But I did it to myself because when you live in the Bible Belt, the church has a lot of leverage.
Right.
And so we had the basketball court. We had called Church on Wednesday. We called it Cow. It was fun. It was recreational and there was girls around, which was always good. And it's funny how churches kind of like sell sex to kids. Because they like the girl to get them in, you know what I mean? Like you do the thing where you like pass the apple around underneath your necks, and I'm like, every kid has a fucking hard on. Every boy has a hard on out here, unless they're closeted gay, and then they're like, well, maybe they're next to a boy, and maybe they are. But the whole thing, it was like that caused so much damage in my romantic and like intimate relationships going forward, to where like I would resent myself, that would be projected onto somebody else because of like this internalized sex shame. So I don't think he's looking at the whole picture here, and it was really, but I think that again. What is it? The elephant in the writer, right? Yeah. I'm like, your emotion is pushing you in one direction. And I think you being the person who created that argument needs to take a step back. Yeah. And who am I to criticize Jonathan Haidt, right? But I just noticed that, and I was having trouble articulating it in a conversation with him. I wasn't going to have a debate with Jonathan Haidt at a conference,
right?
In that scenario. But I did see, like, I'm like, this feverishness to own the left, from even intellectuals. I think it blinds people, man. And people come at me for having a secret conservative agenda and things like that, which I don't. I'm not a conservative. I align with conservatives on a handful of things, but not people that are that far right, like the center right, maybe. But it's weird. It is blinding in a way.
You know, I think it's because of where he's at. It's the waters you swim in. So it's the waters you swim in Texas growing up. He is in academia, and you could see at this conference all these college professors, like they are really worried because that's their world. They don't even. Jonathan Haidt admitted he was in his 40s before he ever realized that conservatives could be anything but crazy. Like he was in his 40s. Like you were in these echo chambers. Yeah. I'm in education. I'm in K through 12 education. It's the same thing. At least I'm in LA. So it's probably not the same in Idaho or something, but where I am.
The school teachers in my hometown carry guns.
So. Yeah, so that's the thing. So it's very geographically diverse wherever you are in the country. But where I am in Los Angeles, in these big metropolitan areas, it is really one type of thinking, which is why I've never voted Republican. I started voting Republican for local elections in California because I think the balance is off in California, but I've never voted Republican up until 2018 for any office. And yet I call out the left a lot because that's like my crew, and I see the craziness there more in my life than I do see the craziness of like the alt-right. Those people just don't. They're very quiet. They're not emboldened to say what they think. They're shut down in like Los Angeles, where the extreme ones on the left are just very vocal and bold. And I think they're more likely to corrupt my world of schools. Yeah. So I think that's what John has, is in his world, he just doesn't get exposed to reasonable ideas from conservatives very much. I think that's definitely a blind spot of his. And a lot of these people.
Then again, and it's, I heard a lot of things, and I want to be critical of the conference because that's what it's for, right? Yeah. I mean, it's a heterodox conference. And I went to a lot of different, I think I missed like a couple of the breakout sessions, but I was at most of the opportunities I had to go see something I wanted to see that wasn't about education, which was rare there because it was so academic. But we had a lot of discussion around humanizing the other, right? Like humanize the other person, humanize people you don't disagree with. And to me, there is kind of some implicit self-righteousness in that. Like, I need to have the power to humanize the other. When instead, that starts with you, in my opinion, right? And maybe that's kind of more of a Buddhist principle. Like it starts with you. If you bring an energy of humility to a conversation with someone and can maybe admit how you've changed your mind, what you've been wrong about, what you agree with a conservative on if you're a liberal or vice versa, that sets the stage for a conversation. But if you think that in my own glory, I need to humanize this other person, to me, I'm like, it's a two-way street. Like it doesn't start with humanizing someone else. Yeah. And I guess there is a place where it's like, if you have a propensity to say like, well, this person is evil because they believe that trans people should exist. I mean, I guess I get it, but at the same time, it's worth considering like someone's worldview and also considering your life experience and what led you to where you are and your way of thinking and how it may be flawed and how your life experiences may not line up. And that's not the other person's problem. It's both of your issues, right? It's just both of your like limited perspective and limited lens on the way you see the world.
Yeah, I think one of the things that comes up that I found is a great tool for trying to break down walls between people that disagree is vulnerability, showing vulnerability. You know, it's a weird thing, Connor, is I have a fear of public speaking. So if I'm speaking for like 10 adults, I get like, I'm shaking, I don't like it. But I can speak in front of 500 teenagers and be just good to go.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, that's weird. Why is that? So I was trying to think about it. It's not that teenagers aren't brutal. They're way more brutal. If I have a peen stain on my pants, they're going to have to be hard, right? But then if I show embarrassment, like, oh my gosh, I feel really terrible, I show real vulnerability to them, they are really quick to recognize the vulnerability. They're teenagers. They are all super insecure. They're very willing to go, oh, okay, I'm soft. You're showing softness. I'll be soft towards you. But you have to be willing to show that vulnerability. And a lot of these really smart people that we interacted with, you know, like these college professors, these public intellectual types, they don't show a lot of vulnerability and humility.
No. I mean, think about the last time that Brett Weinstein, showed vulnerability.
Yeah.
He's shown a lot of resentment and a lot of bitterness, you know, and a lot of frustration.
Just that softness of like, you know, I'm really struggling here.
I'm embarrassed at the economic conversation. So we had 3 black men talking to us about race issues, economics, like their way, their views. And he was like, it meant so much because what was the other man's name?
John McWhorter.
John McWhorter was up there, and he was talking about how when people call him an Uncle Tom or a coon, that it doesn't fucking bother him. He's like, you know, it's basically said, fuck him, right?
Yeah.
And Glenn was like, it hurts.
Yeah, I love
that.
And
I was like, that, because it does.
Yeah. And he just said it, and then there was a silence in the room.
Yeah.
I think people didn't expect it.
And he said it softly.
And it Lowry, was like he's so well respected in all of these different spaces. And for him to say like this random comment hurt him, or from these random, just like the trolls even, that it hurts him, I thought that was a really important thing for him to acknowledge.
Exactly. And maybe, I think the other guys also, that's a very personal experience, right? Like people can say things to me that I'm like, well, whatever, dude. Like that's just obviously not true. But people say things like cut. You know, especially if there's an ounce of maybe like truth or maybe something you believe about yourself in that, or I can see that. And it was like that moment of vulnerability. Like I was like, that's how I remember his name and nobody else's that was on the panel, right? Because I didn't know him before that experience. And I was like, damn, that was real. And his groundedness and the way he approached race issues, I thought was really eloquent, you know, and awesome. How we haven't taken seriously helping black kids when it comes to education and doing something about these families. And we kind of like bypass all these things. And it's like the idea that we haven't taken it seriously. We've played, you know, song and dance hand waving about these things, but we haven't sat down and taken it seriously. And I was like, that's so spot on. And that's not passing the buck and saying it's welfare's fault or whatever, you know, it's conventional conservative arguments. It was an indictment of all of us.
Yeah.
For distracting. It was so well said. And I was really impressed by him.
Let me ask you at this conference, because we're in this like online social media world that a lot of people here were not. I was surprised at how many people. Can I curse?
Yeah. I've said fuck like 36 times.
How many people shit on the, I don't know why I wouldn't be able to, but how many people shit on social media? I was actually surprised. And John Haidt was one of the biggest ones. He's like, it's not good. And the one we were at today, that woman who's the educator, she's like, social media is not a place for nuance. It's not a place to discuss topics, I would say, for anybody. And that's not true. I mean, the platform's not ideal, but I think you can do. I had a talk with Haidt about that. But, you know, there's a lot of things that were talked about that these very smart college professors were like, that's fascinating. And you and I were kind of like, yeah, we've been on this for a while. These tools are ways to get information pumped quickly, while these, you know, academic nerds are reading these books and stuff like that. We're getting it real quick in like a TikTok and learning all this information. I don't know. I think we're at the forefront of something that they're not.
I think you're absolutely right. And I had a pretty serious disagreement with them as well. And I had this conversation with a couple of speakers or presenters as well. To do, and this is not in the era of like self-righteousness at all. To do what you and I try and do, one, it's a terrible way to grow an audience. Yeah. Nuance is a terrible way to grow an audience. I could go full MAGA tomorrow and have 100,000 Instagram followers. Or I could go full Marxist tomorrow and have 100,000 Instagram followers, right? And a Patreon full of people, and I would just tell them what they want to hear, and I would make money. That would make me a grifter, and I have zero interest in doing that. But if you're talented and disciplined in the way you do it and principled, if you are principled and show up in a principled way, and people can, this happens to me all the time. So my favorite message to get from someone is, I disagree with you, but I appreciate that you're consistent. And I was like, thank you.
Oh yeah.
Thank you. She's like, you know, or I agree with you on this thing, but I disagree with you on so many other things. I'm like, awesome. That's you're the kind of person I want to have around. Because there are people that agree with me on like almost everything, right? And some people tell me that I'm like their go-to source for news, which I think is probably not. They need to maybe mix it up a little bit, you know. But I do get varied sources, and I think people appreciate that. And I'm very clear about where they come from because they're literally on the screen while I'm talking. So I think it's a talent. I think it's a skill set. I think that many people in that environment resent that they can't do it well. And they may be a little bit entitled to people treating them in that way, which is unrealistic in a social media environment. But if you can convey nuance in a 60-second reel or TikTok or whatever, right, and have somebody think, that's a gift.
Yeah.
And it's not built for this machine, right? You're trying to do something different. It's like to me, it's like saying that electric cars are a bad idea because no one's figured out how to do one yet, but it was pre-Tesla. It's like, you just got to do it a different way because everybody's trying to make consumer products instead of making a high-end product and then making more affordable versions of a high-end product. He turned it upside down. And I think if you and I come out with that premise of like, this is a place for nuanced conversations. I get hard for nuance. You know what I'm saying? It's like and I will take an argument that I don't even agree with just to make your argument stronger because I'm doing you a favor. Yeah. And if people, and that's the thing about like even in the Patreon, it's a smaller community. It's 70 people. I wish it was more. But that's what we do. And I have crowdsourced conversations and I get to see people's conversations in the comments thread of a topic request for a podcast. And I get to read those off to a bunch of other people. And it's really, I have cultivated that environment. So I have hope. Yeah. But if you've never seen that or experienced it, like I would like for Jonathan Haidt to get into my Patreon, right? I'll pay for it for him and listen to some of the conversations that the topics that people bring up and how we go about discussing them. And sometimes it's as simple as like, hey, you're being told to care about that, but you probably shouldn't.
Yeah. You know what though? It's a quality and quantity thing though too, because I've talked to like people, I'm sure you have, who have big following on like Instagram, hundreds of thousands of people. But then if you look at like how many like deep like direct messages you get or I get, like it's a lot. It's people who are like writing long things about how I open their mind up to new things. Thank you for helping me to think, how to help it. Like and then these people with hundreds of thousands of followers, it's like mindless content. Yeah. It's like, oh, you fell over on a beach and got some sand in your eyes. And it's just like, da 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 da. So like you might only have 70 on Patreon. I don't know. I have a Patreon, I think, but it's not many people. Like, but those people are like, they're loyal to your ideas and they really buy into what you're doing. Like they really buy into it. And there are people with 1 million followers who don't have any real buy-in. It's mindless. It's mindless, just like flash garbage. And what we're trying to do is, which the platforms are perfect for that. Yeah. You know, Instagram is perfect for just the mindless garbage. Fall over, make a sound, blah, 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 blah. And you'll get a lot of followers. And what we're doing is something very different, but it's deeper. It feels like it's like, okay, so this is possible. So that's the conversation I have with that. It's like, it's possible. You don't think it's possible? He's like, no, it's not possible. And I took out my phone.
Just so close-minded.
This stuff.
I know. So close-minded to think that way.
I know. I showed him my phone. I showed him some of the stuff that I'm doing. He's like, he was like surprised. Like he had his mind blown. Yeah. Because it's extremely close-minded.
I also felt like he didn't take me very seriously.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I mean,
but then again, like that's an aesthetic piece, and I'm not an intellectual, so it is what it is. Somebody called me a faux intellectual today, and I was like, I don't pretend to be an intellectual, dude.
Yeah, is that an insult?
I guess I don't know. I was like, all right, whatever. But yeah, I mean, these people, I was kind of shocked by that. It's like you're talking talking open-mindedness while being closed-minded. It was really strange.
There's data people though. So they're looking at the data around this and we do an aggregate data thing. Like, social media is bad for all these reasons, but that does it. Same thing. You look at the data on electric cars. Yeah. Like the GM was the EV1 and stuff. It's like a top speed of 60 miles an hour, goes 80 miles per charge. Like this thing's garbage. Yeah. Okay.
It's basically like a Barbie Jeep.
Yeah. Right. It's like a Power Wheel. But why can't we just but you need someone who's like Elon just go like, no, there's potential here. We just need to flush it out. Yeah. And everyone's going to come after him, the oil companies, the car companies, but it's like double middle fingers. Fuck you. I'm going to do it anyway. And then after I do it, everyone's going to go, oh, awesome. I'm on board with this too. I was always supportive of it and all that kind of shit. Yeah. I think that's kind of where this whole social media world is headed. And I think that we're just, to some degree, this crew that we're, in whatever this is like kind of just early adopters of it.
Yeah. And I mean, even at this conference, I was like, I want to have a room next year. I'm actually going to pitch this to him. Yeah. Or I'm going to actually have a panel or a room full of, and I want to bring 2 random people up with different views, and they're just going to argue with each other. I'm going to teach them how to do it better.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be like, oh yeah, well, think about this. Cause I do have a knack for steel manning arguments on both sides. It's something, I don't know why it is, but I think it's because I went from being a super conservative Bible Belt kid that listened to Rush Limbaugh to Austin to being kind of a little bit of a lefty. I don't know if he was ever like far lefty.
Okay.
But I liked universal healthcare. I like Bernie Sanders. I thought that stuff had merit. I thought it was worth having. It was valid enough for a conversation, which is kind of the litmus test for me. It's like, is this valid enough for us to have a conversation that could be beneficial? I'm not like, this is what needs to happen right now, tomorrow. But, and then kind of meeting back in this center left, independent indictment of both political parties. I think the biggest threat to democracy, which is really funny because people like to talk about this from the Democratic Party. I'm like, Democratic Party and the Republican Party, the DNC and the RNC are the biggest threat and biggest impediment to American democracy. And if you can't see that, I cannot consider you a serious person.
Have you always thought like this? Do you have to work to like think to steel man and be politically homeless, or is that just like your natural operating system?
I'm incredibly so if you look at the Big Five aspect scale, Jordan Peterson, have you done that before?
I never did his, but I've done another one.
Yeah, so it's the same. He just white labeled it. I am high in. This is why I was a good life coach. Yeah, I'm very empathetic, and I'm in the 1 percentile for agreeableness. Okay. So I enjoy arguing, and I have a very stubborn family. And so for me, I find joy in even taking, like I said, taking positions I don't agree with just to fuck with someone. And I used to kind of use it as like to be a bully and to get my way and to get attention. Cause I was a fat kid. So you have to find, I was funny and I was I was a funny fat kid. I was like little Chris Farley of my junior high. So for me, a lot of it was kind of stuff like that. Like I would like mess with my friends' parents when I was a kid about their belief systems.
Picking fights and
just messing around. And it was like, it was fun it was like enjoyable for me. I was able to see, especially when I'd lost weight and became like fit and was coaching CrossFit, I could see that when you're not a fat kid, that just makes you an asshole. And I didn't want to be like, when you're fat, people like it kind of like you're jolly. And when you're not, then you're like, I'm 6'4" and have the gift of bone structure. Now I'm just a dick. And so I had to really do some self-reflection on that. And I had to learn what empathy was. And I went through like a kind of personal development journey. But that never went away. And then I was in environments when I worked for like On It and these different people where I saw people that were articulating narcissism as a benefit well and selling it. So I had to find a way to articulate the opposition to what I consider toxic traits that were being sold as personal development. I had to find arguments against that. And that was very complicated because you're talking about very charismatic, articulate arguments for being a piece of shit. And I'd be like, maybe I need to articulate this in a different way. And even looking at things that I really, am passionate about, I have to also understand both sides. Like if you're going to be a psychedelic advocate, right? You do not want to be Timothy Leary. Right. You want to be able to say, here are the upsides, here are the downsides, here's what's appropriate, even for marijuana, right? I don't think it's a good idea to smoke marijuana until you're about 20 years old, at least. That's when I started. And I think and even maybe that's a little too early. Here and there it's probably fine, but like habitually, if you're going to be a daily smoker, like I smoke almost every night now. I have no issues with it. I do snack too much, but as far as my mind goes, I'm good. So it's like, you have to be able to have those kind of conversations. If you want to have strong opinions, I feel like you need to be able to acknowledge your unintended consequences. Yeah. And if you can't acknowledge the unintended consequences of what you're passionate about, because everyone has them, then again, I can't take you seriously. Yeah. And politicians are notoriously bad at that.
Well, I think a lot of politicians see it as, if you highlight what's wrong with me or my party, then that weakens us. And I fundamentally disagree with that. Yeah, like you can't, like if you have to show self-awareness of this is where we're wrong, this is where we're good. It's interesting you talk about agreeableness, because you and I, like when we met, I think I put it on Instagram, it was like the Step Brothers. I was like, wow, we align on a lot of things, but our personalities are, I am very high in agreeableness. I'm a school teacher. Yeah. Mr. Reusch, my parents are mean to me. I'm sad. You want to talk to me? It's like, yeah, come on, listen. Like that's like empathy. But like, I'm also just like, when people say things, it's interesting. Like when people say things that are like attacking me, I'm like, okay, I'm like, don't want to fight. I really don't. And I get involved in all these fights, but I really don't want to. Mm-hmm. I don't seek them out. I just have to stand my ground.
And I think it's good for you. Yeah, I think it is really good. Like
it would be disingenuous if I tried to take your approach. I wouldn't be able to do it well.
I don't have to think about it.
Yeah, I would have to.
And that's one thing too about even coaching weightlifting or whatever these different things I've done in my kind of careers in life, is I really enjoy pattern recognition and finding problems with things. Yeah. Because when you think about it, whether it's CrossFit or gymnastics or weightlifting, these things that I did into politics, human behavior science, you're looking at someone's pattern of life or pattern of movement and finding weak points in that, which may be complicated, right? So if you think about a snatch, which is taking a barbell from the ground to overhead in one movement, something may present itself in the exact same way in two different people and be caused by two completely different things. And for you to you need to understand whether is it an upper back strength issue or is it a weight distribution issue when you're pulling? Are you not using your legs, or do you not have the capacity in your upper back to sweep the bar back into the certain position? And you've got to be able to notice that to be good at what you're doing. And I always wanted to be good at what I was doing. I mean, I would watch, and this is kind of my personality. When I started coaching CrossFit, I would watch Kelly Starrett videos. I'd watch them one time through with the audio on, and then I'd restart him and watch him with the audio off, because I wanted to see the way he communicated with his mannerisms and his body, because he still is to this day incredible at that. And I started, because I was watching it like mirror neurons, I started reflecting in the way I coached, the way somebody that I respected handled themselves. And I do the same thing with arguments now. When I was listening to podcasts back in the day, especially when I was deer hunting, I'd listen to Sam Harris on Joe Rogan's podcast back in the day, and I would, or Chris Ryan. And I knew all of Chris Ryan's work, and I knew all of Sam Harris's work. So they really weren't telling me anything I didn't already have a pretty good grasp of. But what I was listening for was, how does he get to this conclusion? Or how does she language this in a way that makes sense? How does this person's brain get from this conclusion to that conclusion? That's what fascinated me. So I started looking at the patterns. And when I started to understand the patterns, I could say, well, that actually fits my personality type and I can embody that. Or, I could see a flaw in it somewhere, and maybe that would teach me something. So I was actually learning more from their thought process, because Rogan's so good at getting that out of people. He's probably the best at it, really. And so that was really fun for me. And it's just patterns, really. At the end of the day, it's like there are commonalities and principles. And if you have principles, then you can create like a framework for your life. And then from there, you're essentially operating within a system of patterns.
Yeah, that's interesting. So it started with CrossFit, and then you just apply. That's kind of like how you do one thing is how you do anything or everything. So you looked at CrossFit, and it's like, I can apply this to even intellectual pursuits and stuff like that. Yeah.
Or I wouldn't even say CrossFit, but just human movement in general. Like right now I'm fascinated with golf, but I'm fascinated with it because I don't understand how the human body's supposed to move. I understand the physics of it, but I still haven't quite figured out like where the weight moves and this, like how, and it because I haven't figured it out, it's driving me absolutely fucking insane. Like I have to be golfing. Kelly was like, you haven't golfed in 2 days. And she's like, are you going crazy? And I was like, yeah, I'm losing my mind. I've been watching it on TikTok.
And there's YouTube videos that do that, like show you how to think about your weight and stuff like that.
There are. I try not to get too caught up in it and try to feel it myself too, because if I can't feel it, I can't communicate it.
Maybe it'd be a good video then after you know that pathway. Like I teach teenagers. Yeah. Teenagers don't give a shit about the stuff I'm teaching. And the truth is,
history,
I don't
right?
either. Huh?
History,
government, economics, civics, stuff like that. But I don't care either. Like there are history teachers at my school that are like, they like do Civil War reenactments and stuff. Like they're like history buffs. I don't care about history. I care about like helping these young people find a life that's full of meaning and is awesome and
so
great.
It's really just a vehicle for that.
Yeah. So if I don't give a shit about the War of 1812, they definitely don't. So what I have to do is I have to do exactly what you're doing, which is like pattern recognition. I have to find what is interesting about the War of 1812 for me. And then once I find that pathway, I just share that pathway with my class. Yeah. And that's it. That's how I teach everything that I do. And it works because I don't naturally, what happens is like a physics teacher or a history teacher goes to these 16-year-olds, how do you not care about physics? It's like, because I'm 16, man. I'm just trying to get my dick wet. Like, I'm just trying to, like, I mean,
you have to find a way, you have to have enough vehicle for them to communicate that. Like, why is physics important? And like, some of the best teachers I ever had found a way to make things that were things that like college kids weren't particularly cared about, right? Like, the best teacher I ever had of my entire education was American literature after 1776. Okay. 1,000-person class. Yeah. Okay. I cared so much about this class. He doesn't give 100s. I got a 99 on my midterm or my final, and it was written.
Yeah. Why? Why'd you like it so much?
Because poetry analytics is pattern recognition and archetypal symmetry. So right. So like a peach isn't a peach. This isn't a flower's not a flower. A road's not a road. Right. Two roads diverge in a yellow wood, so I cannot travel both. Like you may think, oh, he's taking the road less traveled by, but he's not. If you look at it, what's actually happening is that he will tell the story down the road that he took the road less traveled by, not that he actually did, because that's how he wants to remember it.
Wow, I'd have to go back and read it.
I mean, look at it. He says, you can't tell which one is more traveled. but he's taking the road less traveled because that's the story he wants to tell himself.
Yeah.
It's really cool.
So that just connected with you, the way your brain works.
Dude, I was sitting in a room with 20 frat and sorority people tutoring them on how to analyze poetry as a fucking meathead.
Yeah.
It was so weird. But this guy could make it,
though.
he could make it so intriguing and so fun. And it was these like, and if you read it the first time through, you think this is dry, right? But he would communicate it in a way. He wore a denim vest that said poetry on the back. He was amazing. He was like, it was insane. And I was so enamored by this guy, and it kind of wanted to like be more like him in the way that he could communicate things. And it was just something it was special, but he found a vehicle to communicate to 1,000-person class. Right. And had people engaged. You know, not everybody. Some people just didn't give a shit because they don't give a shit about anything. But it was like, I would talk to the people in the class and it was like, wow, that was like really interesting. And it surprised people because it was a required English credit, right? Or literature credit or whatever it was, you know? So that really did inspire me to like, you can make something like this. Or even Kelly Starrett, for example, he made stretching cool. How do you make stretching cool, right? You find a way to communicate to people that actually care in a way that resonates. And this idea of resonance to me is so important as well. It's like, can you understand and empathize with somebody so much that you can resonate with them even when you're disagreeing with them? Yeah. You know, there's something crazy about that.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, real world application, especially for young people, you know, they're not thinking down the road too much. They're just, how is this going to help me? And I tell my students, like, you got to ask your teachers, why am I learning this today? How is it going to help me today and tomorrow and 10 years from now?
Yeah.
And my colleagues get really annoyed and pissed off with me. Like, why are you telling these kids that? It's like, what are you talking about? Like, do you ever learn something that you don't want to learn? You don't go on YouTube and learn how to retile a bathroom unless you want to retile your bathroom. Yeah. So how can you expect these kids to just all of a sudden care about poetry or something unless you connect it with them about how to be more articulate, how to communicate your ideas, whatever it might be. Math could be problem solving. Why is my air conditioner not working? I don't know, but that's a problem. This stupid math nonsense is also a problem. So there's a formula, you kind of follow it, and it's just not done that way.
Yeah, it's strange. Yeah. It is strange. But then you have someone like, and I wanted to get to Jordan Peterson with you anyways, because I think there's a lot of discussion to have around this man. He did an amazing job of that. That's what actually people would bring up this guy, Eric Gotze. He does a podcast. It was I don't forget what it's called, but he's a Jungian guy. He loves Jung. Yeah. And he's like, on his Instagram, it'll say like how far he's through, like in a percentage, like 68% through the complete Jung works. And I'm like, that's a lot of read. I mean, he's committed, you know, it's really cool. Very interesting guy. So he kept trying to tell me, he's like, hey man, you need to check out Jordan Peterson. You need to check out Jordan Peterson.
When was this? Like 2018, 17 or
17 maybe. Okay. Yeah. Something like that. But all I knew about him was him talking about pronouns. And I'm like, I don't have a fuck to give about pronouns, dude. I don't care. But then I saw a lecture. I think he was talking about Aladdin and Lion King and all this. And I was like,
symbolism. He's this exact. That's the meaning.
Yeah. The whole thing. And it was fascinating to me because I'm like, wow, that's really cool. But then it's like, why do I like Aladdin better than I like Lion King? And I started to understand. I'm like, why? And I'm like, well, because Aladdin was a poor street rat who stole food, then shared it with two other poor children, right? Yeah. Even though Abu didn't want him to, who then got lucky and had imposter syndrome and then lied about all these things I could relate to. Oh, yeah, right? Yeah. And then at the end of the story, you know, and there's a lot of plot holes in Aladdin, and you could say, well, he could have done the other wish, and they could have wished for like to end world hunger and all these other things. But like, you know, Jasmine could have then set the genie free. Doesn't matter though. So, and then you look at, to me, you have The Lion King, which is about a narcissistic fuckhead, Simba, who gets humbled. Yeah. Different story. Right? Yeah. Still a great story, but like one of them is going to resonate with you and one of them's not. And it's like the whole symmetry of the archetypes of these things is really, really interesting, right? Yeah. So when I got into that, I was like, Eric, I was totally wrong. I was totally wrong because he could find a way to do that. But I feel like now, right? And we talked about this last night, this whole Sports Illustrated thing where he like called that woman not beautiful. I don't know who she is. I don't look at Sports Illustrated. I don't give a shit about Sports Illustrated. It doesn't move the needle for me in the slightest. But this like plus size model who's very attractive, you know, looks like a lot of women in the United States, right? Yeah. You know, I mean, most women in the United States don't look like Heidi Klum. You know, my wife is beautiful, right? But she's got bigger hips than Heidi Klum does. Mm-hmm. She's 6'1". She's the height of a model, but like she's fit. She takes care of herself. Yeah. She doesn't have unrealistic proportions. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And it's like you, by insulting this woman and saying she's not beautiful, and you've now said tens of millions of people aren't beautiful. Right? And it's like, what do you have to gain from this? Are you addicted to the controversy? What the fuck are you thinking? Do you not have better things to do with I have better things to do with my time. And I'm not Jordan fucking Peterson. I know. You know? Like go Go for a walk. That's more productive than what you're doing. And he's picked this hill to die on. I mean, I'm bringing it up on Politically Homeless. He had a conversation with Michaela about it, defending himself.
I know.
And he's like, why do you guys hate me so much? I'm like, because you did something stupid. And it's me, you, and 5 other people who respect this guy sitting around a table being like, that was the dumbest shit I've ever seen.
This is a guy who, the respect is even putting it lightly. Like he's been an influence on us in a lot of ways. We really admire him in a lot of ways for things that he's done.
That guy changed my dad's life while he was in prison, right? Helped him put a structure to his life that helped him try to regain the years he spent in prison back with his family outside. I have a deep reverence for Jordan Peterson and what he's been able to do.
I was able to connect with my mom, and like we've been missing each other over his latest book, the
12 More Rules.
Yeah, 12 More Rules. Like I was able to connect with her at a coffee shop. We talked for like 3 hours in a way we haven't done in like a decade.
Exactly. So it's like, there's that, and it's like, and even with that, I'm so critical of that moronic statement.
Yeah, 100%. So it's like, especially because beautiful is something that's very subjective. We were talking about in the car, like there's someone for everybody. You can see someone, that person's disgusting and someone else has just, hearts in their eyes. But I think it's you, when you're in these culture wars and we're on a periphery, I think that you lose it. You have to draw a line in the sand somewhere.
Yeah.
And my lines are going to be different than yours, and Jordan Peterson's going to be different than Ben Shapiro's or whatever. But you draw these lines, whether it's about pronouns or whatever it is. Here's the line. I'm not going past it. And he drew a line there that is not my line. It doesn't seem to be a lot of people's lines. And I think a lot of people thought that his lines were reasonable here. So when he picks an unreasonable line, they feel like duped almost.
Yeah.
But of course he's going to be off sometimes.
Yeah.
Like I think that even these people like Jordan Peterson, Joe Rogan, whoever, they hold them up in such high regard that they say like, he is the guy. He figured it out. He has all the answers.
He speaks nothing but truth.
Yeah. And I think it's actually really good to humble the kind of the sycophants of the JP and stuff like that, to step in it a little bit. Or, the controversy around Rogan, I guess, is a kind of similar thing because he's screwed up too. But like, these people are, they make mistakes. They're human.
Yeah.
And they're smart in like a very niche area maybe or something like that, but they're gonna screw up, and you just go like, all right, well, maybe I shouldn't trust every single word this person says. And I think a lot of people do.
Well, the thing is like, and very rarely do I ever say like, that person needs to apologize for that. Jordan Peterson, you need to apologize for that. That was completely inappropriate and unfair and just mean.
Yeah.
It wasn't mean at somebody who was being mean to you. Nobody said you need to make a fucking comment about this. You invited this shit on yourself, and then you played the victim, and it was petty and childish. And I feel weird saying that about Jordan. I really do, but it's frustrating.
It was off. And I think, again, going back to like what Glenn Lowry said, I think for Jordan to go like, you know what, I was off on that one. I just had some blind spots. Like that would go so much further, because then his people that are looking at him as like the end all be all would go, oh, maybe I can admit when I'm wrong a little bit. I think I just always look for the learning opportunity in your fuck ups.
Exactly. I mean, and you've read the comment thread. Did you go through the comment thread on that? On Twitter?
A little bit. Yeah, it was brutal.
I looked at a few of them. I was watching Kyle Kalinske read some off, and when somebody said, that doesn't mean much coming from somebody who looks like an aging Woody from Toy Story.
Yeah, people are just brutal back, but that's the stuff.
Which is like, but it was like you. But again,
he
invited it.
Like, sure,
why do you hate me so much? What?
Yeah.
And then he said, I'm leaving Twitter, and then he would never left Twitter.
I know.
It was like, dude, are you okay?
Twitter's not like, we were just saying social media is good for certain things. For some people, it's not.
I never got that into Twitter. I use it for like going to find stuff to read or just seeing what's trending, especially if I need something for the show. I'm like, what are people talking about? But it's just not for, I tweet and then I take screenshots and put them on Instagram. Like it's not for me, but I think a lot of these people, the Weinsteins and Jordan, it's like almost like they've reached a point where they're starting to unravel a little bit. Mm-hmm. It's like, I think you're kind of losing it.
Yeah.
And it's not good. And we were speaking about this, somebody, I'm not going to name any names, but I was talking about how there was a prediction in 2017 that he wasn't going to be able to handle it. There was going to be a very public implosion. And I was like, maybe, I can't say that for sure. That's a bold prediction, but it's like, is that coming? Mm-hmm. And it seems like after that, it was like, and honestly, I've actually become more critical of Jordan, and I never agree with him on everything, obviously, but like, he's now entrenched himself in the right-wing echo chambers. His ideas on politics are kind of fucking stupid. They don't make any. It's like. So you're just languaging what Ben Shapiro told you while you were at dinner differently than he is, and that's all I saw. It's like you don't, and that maybe that's, but I don't feel like that's like the left's fault that he's now become like he's become what they said that he was already. He wasn't that before, but now he's kind of become what they said he was. It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy in a weird way.
I wonder if people in these culture wars are so concerned about that they look at him as like their fearless leader and like, okay, so you got to really guide us through this. And he feels like, the weight on his shoulders of like, I got to steer society from going off of some sort of cliff. Like, that's not your job, bro.
Yeah.
No, you're a college professor. And like, I don't mean disrespect, because I like him. Like, but all these guys, like, it's not, or Rogan's another one. Like, oh, he's our thing. Some people, it's Tucker Carlson. Like, they're like, no.
Tucker. They love Tucker.
They do. It's like, no, they're doing their thing. I think actually Rogan handles it pretty well, because he's just like, don't listen to me. Like, whatever, I'm just here. And he doesn't take it too seriously. I think, at least he puts it off like that. But I think Jordan feels like he has this responsibility to save society. You can't.
No, you can't. I mean, you can be a beacon for change.
Sure.
You can change the people that you influence. You're not going to reach the people on the left. You're not changing any. At this point, Jordan, you're not changing anybody's mind about you.
I know.
It's not happening.
It's in some.
So you need to settle for that, right? Like, and that's important for anybody. It's like, sometimes you're just not going to change somebody's mind about you. Like, I used to argue with people on Instagram or whatever, and I'm like, why? And I literally be like, I don't want to argue with someone who is ideologically entrenched. That's I should have that copy and pasted in my notes, right? It's like, I'll just say that, and then they keep going. I'll just nothing. I'll block them, whatever. Delete the comment, whatever. Like, it's like, I'm just not. It's like, but I used to be like, I need to prove this to myself and it's like, how can you, with 4 million Twitter followers and all this influence and being an author and being like cherished by so many people, fall into the same traps as someone like me?
Yeah,
you know, but they do, and it's like, what is happening? And sometimes it's funny, like. Greenwald does that a lot on Twitter. He's like kind of addicted to it too, but he's like, it's more funny because he does own people with facts, because he lives his life in like, well, George W. Bush did this or Nicole Wallace did that. It's funny, but it's like, and he uses it for his content. I think it does bitter him a little bit, but it's kind of on brand for him. Whereas Jordan, it's like, man, we need you to be compassionate. We need you to be understanding of things that you maybe not agree with. And, you know, when we get into the topic of religion and things like that, I like the way he approaches Christianity. I don't have a problem. And he feels conflicted about it, which I feel like it's kind of a healthy way to approach Christianity. It's kind of through a conflicted lens, you know?
Yeah. That idea, I think, is spot on. Like, we need certain people to take certain roles in this whole culture war. And he is not good at being vicious or cruel or mean. I don't think it's even in his personality. I think, you know, I tell my wife this because she's a very soft-hearted person. But then when she like wants to be mad at someone or mean to someone, I'm like, you're fucking terrible at being mean. Like, you shouldn't do it. Like, you just like, I'm not good at lying. So I'm a very honest person because I just like know what my flaws are. So I'm just gonna be very honest. Like, know what you're good at, what your strengths and weaknesses are. And I think that, Jordan, I agree with you. That's a great way to put it. We need you to be the more compassionate side of this. You're a clinical psychologist, man.
That's the responsibility of somebody with that big of an audience and that big of an influence. Is like, we need, as fans, I guess, or supporters, or just people that are charitable to him, it's like, we need you to be the change. Yeah. Right? Like, we need you to lead. Like,
don't add gasoline to this culture.
And don't saying hateful shit on the internet means that now you've normalized all of your people to be hateful assholes. And I have zero respect for that. Anybody who does 100%. It, whether it's Charlie Kirk or some crazy lefty or, you know, or Vosh, like these are the people who just are hateful. Or Cenk Uyghur's a good one. Like, fuck you.
Yeah,
seriously.
Well, that's why it's good for us to call out Jordan Peterson, I think.
Exactly.
For this reason.
And it's like, if you want to be in the camp with those assholes, be my guest. Yeah. But I'm done. Yeah. You know, it's like, there's other really powerful, influential people that are actually acting in a principled way that I can go follow, that are great authors, that are trying to do the right thing. And if you want to be a petty little child, then be my guest. But I want nothing to do with it.
No, I'm with you. Surprisingly,
it's crazy, right? But I did want to get this this Christianity conversation. People notice that we have different beliefs, and it was funny because we were sitting outside the hotel, and you were like, "Yeah, I think we would disagree on some things." Come to find out, we really don't.
I know. I was like, even when I think it was the first day we started hanging out, and then I was like, let's just get in the religion right now, and then I was like, damn it, yeah, we kind of agree. But I think because it's valuable because of our approaches. I think that it's just valuable to just to find the nuance, but like when you are reasonable, you might disagree on like certain elements of the branches or where you draw your line here and I draw my line here, but we both, again, agree on the problems and stuff like that. So yeah, I think religion's something that's very interesting. I'm in a very like kind of inverse way from maybe the way you grew up. And I've kind of been developing this more and more on the download. I don't talk about it much, but I want to start talking about it much because I think my approach is an interesting one. And I actually am interested in running it by you more because I'm truly interested in your take and criticisms on the way that I'm thinking through this. Yeah. Like I'm actually I'm going to value the way that you disagree with me on this because I want to question it. Like religion's not one of those things for me. My faith is not one of those things that I feel is fragile at all. So I will hit it with a hammer and over again because I have faith that it'll hold up. So I'm willing to test it. And I think a lot of Christians are like, don't test my Christianity. It's like, no. Then how much faith do you really have?
Yeah.
If you can't test it.
Yeah. I mean, I want to get into that. I think that'd be really interesting. I really resonate with Buddhism. I wouldn't call myself a Buddhist, but I do like, you have the Shaka Buddha right here behind you. That's one of my fans, Rob painted that for me. Love that guy. But look at it. It's like one thing that the Buddha said, allegedly, maybe, because it doesn't matter if it's real or not, but this is the story, right? Was that Buddhism was not a fixed practice. It would evolve as the practitioners change and grow and as time changes. And I thought that was very eloquent and very forward thinking. It's like the world will change. The world has changed. The world will continue to change. And that's why it's not a religion. It's a belief system, right? The structure, this practice will change as the world changes. And I feel like that's one of the biggest separators between Buddhism, which again, not a religion, and Christianity, is that Christianity is so reluctant to evolve because of the doctrine of the dogma or how people interpret it. And it's so interesting to me that I can read the Bhagavad Gita or Buddhist teachings and these fables, and I don't give one absolute fuck if they are true or not. Right. But it's like, what do I take away from it? What do I apply to my own life? That's what matters, and that's what Buddhism means to me in a way, And then there's an encouragement to practice. It holds up psychologically, which I really appreciate. Taoism does as well. So when we look at it, and then I look at what turned me off about Christianity, so much of it was like this strict adherence to dogma.
Yeah, that Sam Harris talks about that a lot. Yeah.
Very much so. And Sam Harris helped me a ton because he's like, spirituality and religion do not necessarily are not necessarily the same thing, right? You can be a very unspiritual Christian, and you can be a very spiritual atheist, really, in certain ways, or at least agnostic. So that's kind of like my framework on just like the surface level of this thing. Yeah.
So I was with you for on that, and then a friend of mine who was a fellow teacher named Jim Dobkowski. He's a devoted Catholic, and I was like, so what is this evolution? But he's also an environmental scientist, and he's a science teacher. So he teaches evolution. I was like, so what's going on here? And he sent me all of this stuff about the Catholic Church and everything, about how they were resistant to evolution all over and over and over again to try. And look, I don't know how much of this is nonsense or true.
Yeah.
But if it is true, it makes a lot of sense. Is like, we're not going to just blindly accept this. We're going to scrutinize it. We're going to work it out the way that, more like conservatives do. They're the filter. So progressive push all of these ideas. Some of them are wacky, some of them are not. Civil rights movement. There's like Stokely Carmichael. You're like, no, that's crazy. Martin Luther King, okay, you can get in the club. They're like a doorman at the club. You know what I mean? Like, no, yes, okay. They're like the filter for the bad ideas. And the Catholic Church, the way he put it to me was like, they were just filters. I'm not just going to blindly accept evolution. I got to scrutinize it. And now he's a devoted Catholic that believes in evolution. And he's like, because it just took a while for us to kind of sort it out so we don't just blindly adopt the newest fad. And I was like, all right, well, I don't know if that's the way it really played out. But again, if that's the narrative, that makes sense to me.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I don't think that even like evolution discounts like the mystical. Like, it's kind of amazing in its own way, and even evolution, like aside, like human consciousness or just consciousness in general is kind of fascinating, right? And I think that sometimes Christianity doesn't allow you to explore. It's like it explains it all away, but it's like, what about curiosity and like what makes us us? What drives you? And then the shame component, of course, is something that's a whole other thing. But maybe we can get there. But I want to be like, if you were to be critical of Christianity, like what would your criticisms be, and then how have you kind of adjusted to those?
So I'm just new into this world, being public with it. So I think there's going to be a lot of Christians that come after me, because even when in private conversations, it's like, no, that's not the way you do it. Okay, it's not the way okay, all right. So I think it's that's the thing, is like, there's one way to do it. You have to follow it this way. This is what the text says, and you follow it this way. It's like, John Haidt actually has a great quote from his book. It's that the human brain is a story processor, not a logic processor. Yes. So and I explained this to you before, but here's the kind of the way I'm thinking about it, is we're in this computer simulation, whatever it is, this is reality. And God, whatever, the creator, the architect of this reality, wants to give us a guidebook for how to do this properly, because who knows anything? So if you're going to make a guidebook for how to do this properly, you have to sell it in a way that people can understand. If the human brain is a story processor, not a data processor, then you have to sell it through stories. Jonah and the fish, Noah's Ark, Adam and Eve. And it's not factually true. It's a story, but the story is telling something deeply true about how to get through this properly. The way I explain it in my class is like, Adam and Eve. Like, was that, Adam and then all of a sudden ripped a rib out? I don't think so. And I don't think that makes a story less valuable. Yeah. But I think of it as like there was some sort of primate, whatever, caveman, early primate thing that all of a sudden, whether it was through psilocybin or something like that, I don't know, all of a sudden had consciousness. Yeah. It's like the apple or whatever from the tree of wisdom, and then goes, oh shit, I'm naked. What? Oh my God. Yeah. And that's what separates us from animals, is that like self-awareness. And whatever that chimp was, let's just call him Adam.
Yeah.
And then that is actually fairly aligned with the idea of the story.
Yeah.
It's just catered to adopt what we know. You always update your software to bring in the science to how does this fit into the story. And so I'm always trying to take these stories. I go, there's something true to this, even if it's nonsense. But then how does the science fit in? And I don't know if it's the right way to do it, but it's working. And we can get to like why I'm going there. But that's
one thing that I took away from this weekend at the Heterodox Academy conference was like, sometimes more information comes at the cost of the narrative or the structure or the story, right? Actually, stories are good with, you have to kind of fill in the blanks. And I think that's where Christians kind of mess up, is to try and like add more things to make the story more credible, but they just kind of kneecap themselves with it.
Okay.
I'm just saying, explain it away as like, how like maybe trying to over explain why 2 of each animal on Noah's Ark could have gone about, repopulating all of the animals on the planet. Like,
as opposed to just saying like, well, no, they didn't do 2 of every animal.
Yeah, it's like being like, it's a story. It's a fable. And knowing that like Jesus, in my opinion, was a great metaphorical teacher, right? The Buddha was as well. I think the Buddha is probably better, but like Jesus had a great knack for that. It seemed like from the New Testament. And you think that 2,000 years later, right? We already struggle over interpretations of the Constitution, which is 10 times younger.
Yeah.
Right? So you think 2,000-year-old stories that aren't really exclusive to Christianity, and because of them were kind of written like several, maybe hundreds of years after the fact, right? You're going to tell me you can tell the difference between a metaphor and literal reality from 2,000 years ago.
Yeah.
We can't even decide what the Second Amendment means.
Right? Spot on.
So it's like, maybe that's not the hill to die on, Christians.
Yeah, and who are you to know what God actually meant? If you believe in God, like, who are you? Like, I know what God actually means. Like, I don't know, man. I wouldn't want to have a God that I understood. Like, I don't like, it's too advanced. Like there's so much we don't know about the human brain, about the universe, about never seen an electron. Like, I don't like, this is complex stuff. It's like trying to explain Wi-Fi to your dog. It's like, I can't compute this. You know what I mean?
It's like trying to explain Wi-Fi to your dog.
Like if your dogs are like Theo was like, hey, let me tell you about how this internet thing works. It's like, you're going to be off.
Exactly. And that's part of the beauty. Like, if you could comprehend the meaning of life or like all of reality, you'd be overloaded. We don't have the level of consciousness to be able to do that. Like, that's one thing that's fun about psychedelics is
you get a taste of it.
You get a taste of like, wow, this is my big takeaway from all my psychedelics. Like, so there's one takeaway is like, I have very little understanding of what's going on, and I'm actually very comfortable with that. I'm very comfortable with the fact that when I die, I'll probably be surprised. And that's something that I think it's a joke. It was like, what does a rabbi, a priest, and a pastor all have in common? They're all going to be surprised when they die.
I think that's the thing of more atheists. I kind of think of atheists. I'm going to tell you, but like I think of atheists in 2 different camps. Some that are like okay with not knowing and okay with having those mysteries, and then some that want answers. And
dogmatic atheists.
Those are the ones that turn to social justice or whatever it might be because they want these answers. And then there's other ones, Peter Boghossian and stuff like that are just like, I'll never know, and it's okay.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, but some people need that anchor. And they need something.
Someone like me it's really hard for a dogmatic Christian to argue with me because I don't have an agenda to explain to you why I'm comfortable with these things or why it's okay. I don't need, but I also understand for someone like my mom, like her relationship with Christianity and Jesus is good for her. And if she believes it, and that's the thing is, if she believes it and it helps her, then it's real to her. And that's what really matters to me. Like, she's not going to convince me. It's not going to happen. She still thinks she can, which I'm kind of impressed by, that she's gone this long and still thinks she can. But it's like, it's not happening.
Yeah.
But I actually support that. When I call her on a Sunday, I'm like, hey, did you go to church today?
Yeah.
And I've gone to church with her. I hate her pastor. I think he's a piece of shit. But like, she likes him. So whatever. Again, it doesn't matter. I would love if he did. He knows way too much about me too. So we have this like weird, me and my mom used to fight a lot.
Yeah.
And she would talk that through with the pastor. So whenever he sees me, he brings a weird vibe.
Yeah.
Like, and he knows, my grandmother's funeral was at that church, and my eulogy at this funeral was very not Christian. And I have a lot of resentment for that guy because he turned my grandmother, who wasn't necessarily religious, he turned her service into a opportunity for him to preach for an hour and not talk about my grandmother and her life. And I will never forgive that son of a bitch.
Okay.
It was very personal to me because it's like, you go talk to somebody who's in the end stages of ALS, dying, and offer them some kind of hope, and you think that was what you wanted to do. Yeah. Whereas my takeaway, like one of the last times I spoke with her, maybe the last time, I can't really remember, I had to sit down with her, not being the strongest woman I've ever known, as she's died, she's near death, and tell her that we're all going to be okay. And try not to cry when I did it. Like I was telling Kelly the story that she never heard it. Sitting on the bed being like, hey, we're all going to be okay. And you know what? You're going to be okay too.
Give her that comfort. Yeah.
Yeah. Just like, it's like whatever it is, I don't know what it is and no one else does either, but you're going to be okay. And we're going to be okay. And we're going to miss the fuck out of you, but we're going to be okay. And then I didn't even make it to the door of the bedroom leaving before I was like silently crying and then got into the driveway, which is like, because she meant the world to me. She took me in at 5 years old, after already getting all of her kids out of the house, and raised me and my brothers until I graduated high school. Like it was my mom, Yeah. And it was weird because I had this weird relationship with my mom. Was kind of like my aunt. My aunts were kind of like my sisters.
Okay.
And I was the oldest. It was like this weird family dynamic, but it's like, just would do anything for anybody, And it's like, this guy is exploiting the death of my grandmother to make a point about his fucking belief system. Like, you self-righteous, entitled piece of shit. What the fuck is wrong with you?
So that's the thing about Christianity that's interesting. So let's that I think is like what turns people offline. It gets me really frustrated. I think it should get.
I was shaking in the church, dude. It was.
Well, I think
I wish you could have been there to calm it down.
Well, I think it's the same thing with like why I'm calling out the left. Is now, I mean, this is new for me. I mean, it's like a couple years old, and it's actually after reading a lot of atheist books and whatnot. But like, take like the Jesus story. So just like the whole story of him being like a good person, the principal idea is always love. Prostitutes, gamblers, thieves, whatever. Yeah. Come on. I'm going to try and steer you off in a better direction, but if not, it doesn't matter. I love you through it. That's the idea. And then this person who, as far as we know, according to the story, is sinless and does only good, is betrayed by his best friend and all of his people. It's fucking brutal. And then everyone knows he's innocent and he's killed. A murderer is let off so that he can be killed and strung up in the most painful way possible. That's why the Romans designed it that way. Like it's just this horrible story. And the story then is that God comes down to kind of, see that people are wrongheaded according to, like the Old Testament, what they're using the church for. So I'm going to go down and be this role model for how you should do it. So it's God in human, but also as a son. Yeah. And I'm excited for you to come into this world, but I have 3 kids, and when you disrupt that natural order, I can't think of anything worse than losing my kids. So when that happens, you go, God doesn't understand. Is the story? I keep going to the story. I'm not sure what I want to talk about, but like the story is, well, I do know what it's like. Not only do I know what it's like to be tortured and go through that physical pain and betrayal, I know what that's like. And I know what it's like to watch it happen to my kid. So it gives you that, like, God understands me. And when I keep saying
finishes story, up with, forgive them for they know what they do. Right. Which is like, that's a beautiful ultimate story.
So, right. And I say story and you say story. And the reason is because going back to what we were saying before is this is where I think Christians get mad at me. I don't care if it's factually true or not. Yeah. I don't know. And we'll never know. So it's like those things that are just mysteries. I don't know what happened at those times 2,000 years ago, but I don't care because once I believe this story, believe it. Okay. So like belief is like one of those things that like Jordan Peterson talks about and stuff. So I guess the way I think about belief, and I'm really curious on your thoughts on this. So let me just rant a little bit and then give me your thoughts. Yeah. I would love to hear it. Like I believe that this roof is not going to cave in on me. Yeah. Okay. I don't know who designed it. I don't know who the civil engineers are or whatever, but I have, so belief is like, I will bet my life on it to some degree.
If this roof caved in on us, that would 1000% be God. I would be a believer.
It'd be bad. Or a tree could fall over. Who knows? Whatever the fuck could happen. But I have faith. I have faith in the civil engineers. Yeah. So I can have faith in, and even though I never met them or whatever, I have faith in this. And the more that I've leaned into that, having as much faith in this story, this very controversial story, this popular story, as I have faith that when my green light comes up, the person in the control center doesn't make a green light for them too. Yeah. I should have more faith in this. it's helped me to make sense of the world. It's helped me when I'm alone in a dark alley. It's helped me in my kid's birthday. It's just helped me. I'm not trying to like push it on anybody else.
Yeah.
But it's strange how it's made my life better. I did not expect that at all to get in my late 30s. And it's helping me. And I guess the question I have first is like, if people followed actually Jesus's model, like actually the way that he lived of loving everybody and whatnot, in theory, would that mean that the world would be a better place in theory? Or is it too out there, too?
If we're just talking like Jesus model, kind of circumvent the Old Testament, right?
Yeah.
Because that's where things get tricky, like fire tornadoes and because people didn't believe a certain thing and killing people's children because the Pharaoh did.
So let's say the Old Testament is all just fable.
Yeah.
Fable and a guide. And then he is this thing telling you, okay, if you live like me, and you're never going to hit it. So, you have targets out here. That's where sin comes from, right? Missing the mark. But if you're aiming to be as close to that as possible, which pastor didn't, most Christians don't. Charlie Kirk is a Christian. You gotta be fucking kidding me. Like, no, you're not. That's not Jesus-like. It's love everybody. Those people. Jordan Peterson's comment, that was not Christian.
Yeah.
So if people did, wouldn't we be better off? And that's the closest I can get to being an evangelical, even though I'm not pushing it. But I think like maybe we would be better off if people adopted something like this.
So I think this is going to get a little bit metaphysical here. Please. I think that there's a Christ consciousness. I don't think about Christ as an individual. I think there's something about that. And I think that's been embodied by numerous people, right? I think you can talk about that, whether it's manifest in Buddha or Taoism, or you know what I mean?
But it's just easier to grab onto, like Uncle Sam. It's easier to grab onto.
It depends. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that's not to say that Jesus didn't actually walk the earth. I don't know. I wasn't there. I don't know. Buddha could have been 25 different people. I don't fucking know. I wasn't there. Right. It was 2,000 years before Jesus, right? So it's like maybe every 2,000 years something goes down. Yeah. Maybe it's Joel Osteen this time. I'm just kidding.
Whatever happened to that money they found? That just kind of disappeared.
Yeah, right. In the walls.
Yeah, they found 50 grand in the walls after 50 grand was stolen.
But so I think that the this is where I get weird when people like other religions like don't like the other religion. I'm like, listen, it's a matter of resonance. We talked about this a little bit. It's like Buddhism resonates with me because of this principle of detail. It resonates. I read it and I go, that makes sense to me. I can read the New Testament and I'm like, okay, interesting story, and I can analyze it. Like, it doesn't like, I don't have that vibration where it like really gets me. So it's like I like the fact that like Christ consciousness, if we want to call it that, has been manifest in many different teachers that are going to resonate with many different people, right? So you have. Whether it's Taoism or Buddhism or even Islam in some sort of way. I know Sam Harris will probably disagree with that, but things become progressive. I think Islam is probably just like 1,000 years behind Christianity as far as how it's advanced because.
And there's elements of that.
Early Christianity, 600 years ago, was like pretty brutal, right? Yeah. Like you got like there was a lot of murder in the name of Jesus, which again,
the concept is.
Exactly. Yeah. It is what it is, right? And even Buddhists have murdered Islamic people, and that's like the only time that you've ever seen a Buddhist do that. Like a lot of Buddhists like don't step on bugs. You know what I mean? So it's like there's been a time.
The human trap,
there's been a time. Humans are humans. So I think that the beauty of it is that it does manifest itself in different ways that are going to resonate with different people. And there's not it's not a zero sum game. Really, it kind of is because you have one population. But really, if you find the one that resonates with you, and maybe you don't need any of them, maybe it's nature. Right? Yeah. Maybe you feel Christ in nature. Maybe you feel freedom. Or I think some of it is just making yourself feel small. Like nothing will make you feel smaller for me, right? Maybe some people, surfers are like this with the ocean. Yeah. So respect. I'm like that with the mountains. I hike up them at 12,000 feet. I pop out of the trees and all of a sudden it's just open. Yeah. And it's like I hiked up 4,000 feet in 7 miles and here I am and I'm exhausted and I'm drinking water and I just look out and I'm like, this mountain doesn't give a shit about me.
Yeah.
Like it's just, it's so humbling
aspect of it.
There's really something important about that. I think people find that in different places, but it's like the encouragement, in my opinion, should be to find that for yourself and be more curious. That's why when Christians have never entertained the idea of other belief systems and tried to understand them, at least maybe practice it for a week or a month, whatever, just to see, then it's hard for me to really think that your faith is that resilient.
You know who's really good at this is Tulsi Gabbard.
Really?
I've never heard her talk about her faith. She was raised going to like Christian church and Hindu and like all this different things. Yeah. And she said something that resonates with me. The same way that we are with politics is I don't see conflict. I don't see a problem with saying I like this conservative idea and this progressive idea. I don't see a problem with that even within religion. No. I think that God shows his way. I do believe in some sort of architect. I don't know. It's hard for me to wrap around that this is all just a mistake. And if it is, I just don't want to believe that.
I don't think it's a mistake. A mistake is kind of a bold assertion.
Yeah, just like, well, it's just like, just atoms came together.
Yeah.
Like, and there has to be some sort of.
When you think about the concept of infinity, it kind of like, it does make sense. But at the same time, it's like, is that true? I don't know.
I don't know.
I don't know. It wasn't there.
It's not it's not a conflict for me though. None of this is a conflict for me. Like I don't.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
There's just you have to try and give a guidebook for how to get through this. So we have these different guidebooks, and what do the guidebooks all have in common? Okay, that's something really good to look at. And then this guidebook works for me. That one works for you. And like and then we can disagree about like how in this specific situation how we might handle it. But these tenets of like peace and love and blah, 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 I think it's just like, we're going to miss it. We're going to fuck up. But if you're aiming for that, and then when you are an asshole to somebody, you have a little bit of guilt. Yeah. The Christian guilt thing, I'm glad, I think it's wielded like a weapon. Shame is an important part of life. And like
healthy
making good
shame
decisions
is important.
It's really important. When you act like an asshole, it's your behavior, not who you are, but your behavior. You should have some shame. Like, wow, I was not acting Jesus-like, Christ-like. I was not acting like a good person, whatever it is. I want to try to be better. So you're always trying to be better. And whatever guidebook you use for that, I think is really valuable.
I mean, think about shame, right? Shame, there's a healthy shame, right? Let's think about like food. We'll just make it something really easy. Yeah. There's a healthy hunger and healthy fullness, right? But there's also stuffing yourself and becoming obese. And there's also anorexia and bulimia, right? And shame is no different. It's a natural human urge, to a framework, a response to certain things. Being shameless isn't good in certain areas. And sometimes as an adult, you get to decide like, oh, maybe I feel shame in this area. And that's not really appropriate because that's not compromising the moral standard that I now live by, right? I meant that with sex, for example. I was very ashamed of my own sexuality. I mean, I'm a straight dude, but like just sex, I was ashamed of every boner I got. It was like, oh, I'm sinning here. Like my uncontrollable
flip.
Oh, I was, some people went up, some people went down, I went up. But yeah, he was like, and we would take hydroxycut when we were in high school, and that would like all of us would be like in computer class, like, dude, my dick is so hard. It was so crazy, but yeah, it's like I feel like that's inappropriate shame, right? And we see this manifest in a lot of different ways. Like there is a place for it, but that's almost like there's like this baseline for it, and then there's like, where do you want to allow shame to creep into your life, and what necessarily, like, where is that appropriate for you? Like for a lot of people, in the way that like my wife and I have kind of a non-traditional relationship, as far as like inviting other women in every now and then, it's like some people would think that's a shameful experience. I don't think it is, and I don't feel shame about it. So it's like, but that's okay.
Yeah.
Like do your thing.
Well, you're not hurting anybody. I think shame when you're hurting people is a very different thing. Than who you are. If you're not hurting anybody,
if you're texting and driving and you run somebody over, you should be very ashamed of yourself. You know what I'm saying? It's like that's not a
but then even when you hurt somebody, if you're trying to cast shame on somebody, you still do it with love and kindness. Like it's also more effective if you're gonna do it that way. And so you just keep hammering that nail over and over and over again. I think it gets you further. Yeah.
Well, it's weird. Like, so this is a good, I think, segue here. I shouldn't have said that because now it's not a good segue anymore, but this whole thing with the family-friendly drag shows, and like Christina Aguilera apparently like put a dildo on and like swing it around at a family-friendly show. I don't know. I'm seeing all this from, I don't know. I don't have a lot of energy to give to it. I have to be really kind of selective. Yeah. I look at the way I was brought up in like the Bible Belt as like very ashamed of sexuality. And I'm like, well, if I had to choose between that and going to drag shows every now and then as an 8-year-old, take me to the drag shows. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So it's like, do I think it's kind of weird? Yeah. Not my kids. Not my circus, not my monkeys. Right? It's like, if you want to take your like 10-year-old kid to go see Christina Aguilera put a fucking dildo on and like flap it around, I go, okay. Like, and that's maybe those kids will have to like, maybe they are living a shame-free environment and they can run around, but even kids, like I have, like you have kids, like they run around naked, who cares? Like whatever. It's not, I think you shouldn't impress shame on like natural human desires, emotions, unless they're at the cost of someone else. But I have a hard time. I've been not defending the parents taking their kids to see drag shows. Now I think most children would see a drag queen as kind of a clown. And because drag queens are kind of clowns, lots of makeup, big hair, fake, like big, like fake boobs and the thing.
Very
like,
animated.
And then all of them, for whatever reason, without stilettos on, are like 6'3", so they're humongous. If they start doing balloon animals, you'd be like, that's a clown, right? Entertaining, hilarious comedians, a lot of them. Great MCs of events, especially if you're ever at a gay bar and you go to like a drag people a lot of times in MC events at gay bars. And I love going to gay bars. I think you feel so free and liberated there. They're so nice, even they know they could tell them straight, but it's funny.
How do you mean they can tell you're straight?
Usually I have a vibe. Yeah. You know, but I also get a lot of free drinks. I think I spent like $3 there on tip. That's it. It's like I had 25 whiskeys. I was really fucked up. Is it like a dance party?
That's part of the agenda, probably. Get him another drink. Get him another drink.
Yeah, right. Exactly. I was like, but I was there with a girl, so it was fine. This is like a long time ago. But every now and then I have a friend that works at a gay bar here will pop out and do the thing. But I think it's like fun, you know? And it's like, do I think the kid should be like, hey, mommy, what is it's not going to lick itself mean? Like, that's a little weird. But like,
yeah.
I'm not defending them taking the kids to drag shows. I'm defending that it's none of your fucking business. And if long as the kid, it's like you're projecting your morality onto those children. And if those people could project their morality onto you in an even way, they would think that you telling kids that they're going to burn in hell for not fucking adhering to Sky God's wishes is deeply inappropriate, which I do too. So I can say being secular and sitting here, I could be like, you guys are inappropriate over here with the hell shit. You guys are probably inappropriate over here with the drag shit too. Yeah. And I don't feel like that's a conflict. I don't feel like I'm defending anybody. I'm saying, hey, people do weird shit.
Raise your kids the way that you want to do it.
And you know, we'll see what happens.
Right.
You know what I mean? Just like I was raised in this very conservative world, I resented it for a long time. It was very toxic for me. I had to work through it. It was a lot of self-work. But I found gratitude for it later on. Maybe the same thing will happen from the drag way over to another way. Maybe they'll end up being conservatives down the road because like, wow, that was really weird. Maybe we do need more structure and, you know, maybe there is a framework for morality. Maybe that wasn't okay. And now I know that going forward. We're not, but when people start listening, like, well, this is sexual abuse. I'm like,
there is sexual abuse.
There is, but do you want to talk about?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm like that. We want to see real sexual abuse.
Don't be like I get frustrated with the word survivor. I get frustrated with the way people use that for people who are survivors of like sexual assault. I'm like you survive attempted murder and you can survive a rape that was very violent. Like but it's like if your boss grabbed your ass, you're not a survivor. You're a victim of sexual assault. Yeah. Victim is a word. It means a thing. Survivor means a different thing. Yeah. Okay. Holocaust survivors are survivors. Right. If your boss groped you, you're not a fucking survivor. Yeah. You know, and it frustrates me. It's like sexual assault means something. Rape means something. These words are not to be fucked with. They're very serious. And by you saying groomer and this is sexual assault, you are now belittling people who were actually sexually assaulted, and it's fucking inappropriate.
That's the same thing with racism. It's the same thing with
exactly the same.
Words or violence.
Yes.
Because the reaction if someone's being violent to you is you can self-defense be violent toward them. Yeah. So you want to play that game of words or violence. That means I can punch you in the face, I can stab you because you're being violent towards me.
Yes.
It gets a very slippery slope. I'm with you on that. I think, Connor, you're an interesting guy because you are very comfortable with your sexuality. Like you are very like open, like you can go to a gay bar, you can do this. Like I think that's not normal.
I was talking about how I used to flirt with dudes at my gym, the gay guys. But I was like, I flirt with it. I'm a very flirtatious person. So like, I didn't see it that way until somebody said that I was doing it. I was like, oh yeah, I guess I am. Whatever.
But you know, there's that, I made the joke about the Larry David thing. It's like, are you scared you're going to like it? It's like, yes, I'm scared. It's going to be disruptive and all that kind of stuff. Like people have that kind of idea. And I think a lot of these people that are really, Joe Rogan had a joke, like if you're strongly against gay marriage, it's either that you're gay or
either you're stupid or you secretly think dicks are delicious.
Yes, that's what it is. That's spot on. Like these people that are really hard against this stuff, like what are you that scared of? Like what are you worried that's going to happen? And I think there's an element of like, again, drawing lines. I just don't even want to play with that idea in my head because it might unravel something that's deep down that I don't want unraveled.
Yeah.
And I get that.
And I think, honestly, I think that like think about the drag situation, right? Kids taking their kids to drag shows. If those kids turn out to be well-adjusted, maybe like have an appropriate amount of healthy shame and don't have inappropriate shame around their sexuality, they're able to have good relationships. That's not actually what these people that are criticizing it want. They want those kids to be fucked up. And what the thing is, they blow it up so much, they've only created more drag shows for kids. Now, because you've been, Streisand effect, right? Now, because Ben Shapiro said it's bad, the other people, just like whenever Trump said something was good, liberals think it's bad. It's the same thing, right? Because you said it's bad, now these other people think it's good. Yeah. And so if you actually gave a shit about the kids, you wouldn't bring it up. You'd leave it alone. You don't care about the kids. It's never been about the kids. It's about your own agenda. And I don't think children are a fucking political football.
Yeah, it's a pawn. If you really think that, then what you do is the way I use social media, which is you reach out to them like, hey, I have some concerns. Can you bring me into why you're doing this? And I don't think it's really necessary.
Curiosity, right?
But yeah, you bring them onto the podcast and try and work this out in a way. Again, that's loving. You know, I keep going to that, Connor, because You know, when I told you that I was Christian, we were like exchanging DMs and you were like, oh, I had no idea. That's kind of what I'm going through. What I'm going for is I don't wear a cross. I don't want to say like, I'm a Christian and blah, blah, blah. I want to just live in a way that people go, he's a good dude.
It kind of reminds me of whenever Botcha said she was a Marxist. And I talked to her afterwards and I was like, I didn't know you were a Marxist. She was like, yeah. I was like, huh. Interesting, but she never brings it up.
Okay,
I know she's a Jew.
Yeah. I mean,
she puts that out there.
Yeah, she does.
It's weird to be a Jewish Marxist too. That's like a very strange thing. I want to see her and Ben Shapiro have a conversation. By the way,
well, he was. I mean, that's I guess why Hitler hated him. But but that's I think it's a more potent way to do it. And instead, that's why I get really annoyed by these people who are touting Christianity, and then they do horrible things like, I'm gonna screw up, I'm gonna be mean to people, but I'm hoping that if I'm kind enough, then people go, because it's the concept of like, if you have a friend that you've known for 10, 15, 20 years, right? And you know them to be a really good person and you are a strong Democrat or whatever. And then all of a sudden your friend shows up in a MAGA hat. You have two choices, really. One, that my friend's not who I thought they were, or MAGA people are not who I thought they were. And it's shocking how many people go to the latter. I mean, people stop talking to their dads, their moms, their sisters, brothers, because they took a political stance. You're a bad person. I've known you for 30 years, but you're a bad person because you support this political idea.
I mean,
baffling.
There were some people that were upset that one of the parents of the victims of the Uvalde shooting was like defending January 6th.
Yeah.
And you're like, that's what we care about right now? This guy's kid is dead. Like, I don't give a shit how bad of a person is. A child dying is a fucking tragedy. You know?
Yeah. Like
it doesn't, I don't give a shit if it's an actual literal white supremacist with the child. When that child dies, that's sad. Because that child didn't have to necessarily follow that ideology, right? If a white supremacist dies, maybe that's not a bad thing. But like a child dying is a child dying, regardless.
100%.
And there's life to be lived there, and there's changes to be made. And that it's fucked up, dude. It's like what gives you the right to even bring that up right now? As if this is the appropriate time to talk about that. People leveraging the death of children for their own attention seeking is disgusting to me. But anyways, go back to what you're saying.
That's I think that's the best move. If you want to bring people into your camp, into our political homeless camp, into your Democrats, Republicans, woke, whatever it is, what you do is you model this kind of good behavior. People that like are attracted to what you're doing, they feel warm, welcome, loved, kindness. That's what attracts people to you. It's not telling people what you are. It's showing people this is what I'm doing, and they go, okay, and it'll start to disrupt a little bit. Oh, you're a hardcore, card carrying Democrat, and yet you're great with all these things. Okay, well, maybe the Democrats aren't completely lost.
Yeah.
It's a lot better approach, and I don't see it nearly enough.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're absolutely right. The thing, I love that line though. It's like either I was wrong about this person, I was wrong about the MAGA people. Yeah. And I had that same conversation with like when it came to my family, because I was defending Trump supporters. I never voted for Trump. I never will vote for. If he runs again, I'm not voting for the guy. Same. Sorry, I know upsets people. Don't give a shit. I'm not doing it. He's a piece of shit. I don't like him. It is what it is. I think I want to have like a president that I could tell my kids, like, you can aspire to be like this person. And until we get one of those, they can all suck a bag of dicks as far as I'm concerned. Yeah. So
we're in trouble.
Yeah, we very much are. But when we look at this thing, it's like, I would talk about my parents. I'm like, listen, a lot of these people that are voting for Trump aren't white supremacists. I mean, there are a lot of white supremacists that's who they vote for. Yeah. That the ones that are out there, the few of them that there are out there. But they're just conservatives, man. In my hometown, Graham, Texas, they don't have to deal with any of these issues that we spend so much airtime debating. This is real America, right? This is like small town, blue collar, oil and gas, cattle town, and whether that's the Rust Belt. There's other, like, if you live in the Rust Belt and your whole entire way of life has been undermined, do you really give a shit what someone's pronouns are? Right. And that's what Nancy Pelosi wants to talk about. Like, you're kneeling in kente cloth, right, and doing whatever the fuck you need to do while your constituents are actually suffering, you know? Like Joe Manchin is playing whatever fucking political games he's playing and getting his daughter a golden parachute of $30 million after she outsources all the jobs from a pharmaceutical company, right? And
gets in West Virginia, right?
In West Virginia. Yeah. And you're like, you son of a bitch.
Yeah.
You deserve no one's respect, you fucking coward. And it's like, what are we doing here? There's real people that are suffering. And I'm fed up with both sides not giving a shit. You know, and this
is all a show. I mean, that's where Batya went off, which I thought was really good about making
she and I have a very similar personality when we handle these things, by the way. We have very similar tones.
Just fire. Pia Milani, who's actually Eric Weinstein's wife, the economist, she had this idea about identity that ever since I heard it, I was like, that is spot on. The Democrats used to be the party of the working class. They used to be the party of the working class. And then when you are the party of the working class, you have to deliver hours, treatment, things like that that are opposing the corporate donors. So the Democrats kept losing. They kept losing. They kept losing. And then when Clinton came in, it was like, well, we keep losing. So like, well, we got to get the rich people, the donors, the corporate class on our side. So we're not going to be the party of the working class. We're going to be the party of identity. Yeah. What's cheaper than just saying, oh, you're Filipino? I represent you. Yeah. And that's fucking it. That's all they fucking do.
Well, and that on top of the fact, Taibbi talks about this in Hate Inc. And you've read that book. Yeah. It's like journalists really should be a working class job. But what it is now is people who live in New York and they may make $25,000 a year working at the New York Times, but mommy and daddy have money. You see what I'm saying?
Unpaid internships. Unpaid. Ever since Watergate, it became this hero thing.
Exactly. It was like All the President's Men, West Wing type people. I never watched either one of those, but it's like I get what the premise is, and like that kind of made this thing. And it's like Taibbi's dad was a journalist in a small town newspaper, and it was like working class job, working class living. And then maybe the owners of the paper were more conservative. Like they were talking about that today. You had these like left wing working class journalists was pretty common, and then you had the editors were pretty conservative. So they had this like tug of war pulling back and forth, and that would end up with real news. You end up with like a balanced opinion because think about like if you have a kind of a populist left person and the editor is conservative, they're having a dialogue about what is appropriate to put out in a newspaper. You might, between those two things, kind of like I was talking about with libertarians and socialists in government, it's like you get something out of that where it can resonate. It's like, hey, this is actually like a misrepresentation. You have a challenge with your editor versus them trying to dress up yours to reach out to other white collar liberals in whatever city, of choice. If you're at the Washington Post or New York Times, you now have a formula for that, right? It's like Marvel movies. They have a formula. They lost their luster because of the formulaic approach to things. And that's where we're at with journalism as well. It's like we've become predictable in what we consume. And so along with that predictability, we just have very little nuance, really.
Yeah, they're so out of touch. These big newsrooms and stuff, they're just out of touch. And it's not even their fault. I taught in like a really, really tough area of LA, in East LA. And then I moved to this private school. It's like Beverly Hills adjacent. And you can see like how they don't know. I mean, and it goes both ways. Like the kids in the hood have no idea what it's like. And they probably look at them and they go, oh, their life is so easy. Nah, man, they're still teenagers. They haven't seen their dad in a month. Like they're, like they have problems too. Just because you're wealthy doesn't mean you don't have problems. But you're not tuned into the bigger systemic problems and policy issues that are crushing the lower class because you never felt those policy issues. And your job is to highlight what these policy issues are to try and get some, extrinsic motivation toward the politicians to start making better changes. And it's just not happening.
Speaking of newsroom, you said newsrooms. I think about the newsroom. Do you play that clip from the first episode of the newsroom to your kids in high school?
I used to, but here's the thing. I actually, I used to look at that and go, that's right. Now I take issue with it.
Yeah. Oh, really?
Yeah. So my issue with it is when he says freedom, we all have freedom, blah, 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 Canada. And then I go, Canada.
Well, well, at the time it was accurate.
Right. That's what I'm saying. I actually just watched that like a month ago. It's funny we're talking about this. I watched that. I go, Canada, UK. Well, in the UK, they locked up, was it Catherine something like for using the wrong pronouns on Twitter. They put her in jail. Yeah. In Canada, they took people's donations and then they took people's bank accounts. So, are we? Maybe.
Well, then and you even say, I think the criticism too is like America's not as free as we like to pretend it is. Largest prison population in the world. True. The drug laws, we've been over that. There's so many ways we can say Julian Assange. Yeah. Edward Snowden, like these guys, like they're not free. And they did journalism. So it's like there's Guantanamo Bay, people that were held there for a decade without actually were innocent of any
that's with the Constitution, man.
And that's with no due process, circumvented due process. So it's like I think the thing is like we don't have as many we have more civil liberties, but like there's a hypocrisy in the freedom claim, regardless 100%. If we look at it that way, versus seeing like we're more free than Canada now.
But like I don't know. Also, it's one of those things where like where is better? I don't know. Like you could look at Scandinavian countries, but you can't take immigrants there. It's like homogeneous culture. Like, I don't know.
I really wanted to move to New Zealand to live where that was my escape plan.
They won't take you, right?
Well, I think they will now. We have a business, hard. So it's hard. It was hard. I tried to do it already, and I got my visa denied because I didn't use a visa lawyer. But I had a job at a CrossFit gym, and they had to go through. They had to jump through some hoops to get me, but it was going to be really good. They were opening a new location.
Oh, cool.
Toa CrossFit, great. Shout out to them if you're ever over in New Zealand, Wellington, New Zealand. But I was really excited about it, and didn't work out. And then I got the job on it and stayed here, but. I've never even been there. I just love the place. And I was like, I want to change. I want to go, I was young and really young and qualified, more qualified than anybody else in like that space to go over there. And let it happen. So
I love America though.
But I love it. It was like and now it's like where else would I go?
Yeah, I mean, I love this country, I really do. But I'm also hypercritical of it because, like, the way I explain it to my teenagers is like, your best friend is not the one that says like, "Girl, you look good in anything." It's like, no, your best friend's like, "You look like shit. We got to take care of you. Come on, let's fix you up a little bit." Like,
let's get you a makeover.
So I'm constantly calling out shit. Like I talk about the My Lai massacre. I talk about by the end of the year. It's like starting from, like the Boston massacre all the way up through, the USS Maine to get us into the Spanish-American War, Gulf of Tonkin. These are all just lies to get us in the war.
Yeah.
Like then all the way up to weapons of mass destruction and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. The kids are like, I'm picking up a pattern here.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, we've done fucked up stuff in this country.
I mean, if you ever
doesn't mean we can't get better. We just have to constantly be getting better. And the only way we can do that, that's why I use history for that idea. But I can, again, hold these two things. America is fucked up and I love it and I don't want to go anywhere else. And this is my home. So those are two things and they're not in conflict with me.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, what frustrates me about conservatives is they don't want to take responsibility. This is about whether it's Christianity or America. Yeah. These two things. They do not want to take responsibility for the shadow side of these realities. Like I was going to a job interview once. This is years ago. And I was listening to Daniele Bolelli's podcast on Crazy Horse. And he went into detail about what these, pre-America, but like Americans, westward expansionists, were doing to the women and children. I mean, I'm talking
Sand Creek Massacre and stuff
all
like
that stuff. Yeah. And so it was like scalping their vagina, right? And wearing it as a trophy, women and little girls. Right. And I was listening to him explain this and he like slowed down in his French accent. It's very hard to hear. So you have to really listen. And I was in the parking lot at this place I was going to job. I was crying, dude. Yeah. I had to get my shit together. I was like, dude, you got to you got to go do a job interview. And I was really fascinated with it. And they got to that part. I was like, and then you have someone like fucking Candace Owens who's like, well, the Native Americans were mean to each other too. And I'm like, well, somehow they didn't eradicate themselves. Are you serious, dude? Can you not take responsibility for like what has gone on, right? If you're a Christian, you need to be able to really articulate why, maybe an indictment of the Inquisition. Like these are important things. Like everything has a shadow side. And I think as a history teacher, I would say like there is a gigantic lesson in the downside of being powerful and viewing human beings as inconvenience. And if you think that the westward expansion impact on Native Americans, whether a lot of it was intentional and not, whether it was diseases, doesn't matter. You almost eradicated an entire people. That is on par with the Holocaust. And if you do not believe that, again, I have a hard time taking you seriously. Yeah. Now, was there a Hitler? No. So there's a difference. There's differences. But as far as the loss of life and the loss of well-being for a people, like really, it's like a species gone. It's like, and instead of us saying, having some humility when we got over here as Americans, as white people, saying, hey, there's actually really amazing things about this culture we can infuse to our own. We robbed them of their children. We stole their children. Are you fucking serious? Like, so it's like, take responsibility for the shadow side of America. Like there have been bad things. To think that like the black communities now are not still being impacted by laws of the past is incredibly naive. There's a reason we say the term old money. And just like there's old money that doesn't seem to go away, right? There's systemic issues in the other direction. Right. It's not that complicated and it's not controversial to say, hey, let's do something about that. I just don't understand why that's so hard for someone to wrap their mind around, as if I'm trying to like rip their whole worldview apart. I don't get it.
This is talking about patterns. This is the same pattern. This is politically homeless in a nutshell. Like everything, we can do these things at once. We can say that Western expansion grew a whole bunch of things. That's how we have, the medicine that we have and the technology and the beautiful things that now have air conditioning, all that kind of stuff, blah, blah, blah. Like, yes. And it came at this really ugly cost. Same thing with America probably wouldn't have survived without slavery. So we have these things and I love America and it's fucked up too. And we can just recognize that. We can have some softness. Candace Owens, when she went in on George Floyd, like, I don't think of him as a hero. I don't think like he's, oh, well, that he died type of thing because he was a bad guy at some point in his life. Like, why do you have to, I'm with you. Like, why do we have to, why can't we just hold those two things at once?
Yeah. Well, I mean,
I don't understand
let's just put that on the George Floyd thing, right? Yeah. My dad has a rod in his neck because he painted airplanes and cars. So he wore a helmet and it eventually degraded his upper spine. Oh, wow. So it's a rod. It's like he can turn his head a little bit, but he turns his body mostly. Okay. And when he got arrested, they put their knee on his neck. And they gave him a resisting arrest charge because he couldn't turn his head and put it, when you get arrested, you put your ear to the ground. He can't do that. And they thought he was fighting him. He wasn't. So they're down there trying to turn his head and force it into the ground with a rod in his neck and then discharge him for resisting arrest, which got dropped. Yeah. And it's like, so Candace, my dad's a non-violent drug criminal. Never hurt anybody.
Yeah.
He sold drugs.
He was arrested for drugs.
Yeah. So it's like, so what do you have to say about that? Like the same, they could have killed him right there.
Yeah. Are
you gonna say the same thing? He wouldn't be famous, and he's a white dude. But what, like, it's like, it's not that you're missing the fucking point, Candace, and you're doing it to gain attention. You're doing it they're attention whores, man. And it's so frustrating. It's like, you're just saying something to be controversial. Like Tim Pool does this in the most egregious way. It's like, it should be illegal not to own an AR-15. I'm like, are you dumb? Like, what do you do? Dude, you've had a gun for 2 years. You talked about how you got your first gun 2 years ago. Yeah. Like, I was 5 years old. I was shooting real guns. So how about you let the grown-ups talk and shut the fuck up? And that's how I feel about so many people that, especially new conservatives, are like, I'm so proud of my conservatism. And I'm like, you understand when you were a new liberal, you felt the same fucking way. Can you not see the patterns in your own life? Dave Rubin, great example. I'm a classical liberal. Like, you've now made it where I can't say I'm a classical liberal because I actually am, but I won't say it because you fucking said it. Yeah. You ruined it for me. You ruined the term.
John Stuart Mill is a classical liberal. And follow what John Stuart Mill's saying. You're not doing it.
JFK, classical liberal. Right. It's like, God damn it.
It's wild, but so we can apply this kind of stuff that we're doing, Connor, is like, we can apply this to, seems like all of these things, and we can call out the crazy on the left, crazy on the right, because they're both playing the same game. You and I see it. The people who listen to your stuff and follow my stuff, they're seeing it. That's why it resonates with them. And that's why I think that even though they might, like those people who are more polarized, have more followers or more clout or whatever it is, they don't get the like, oh man, yes, finally there's some nuance here. There's something like, I knew something was off about them and them, but you're kind of highlighting it. And I think that's why it's resonating. I think that's why people wanted us to have this conversation. I think that's why like we can go through this as like, we can hold these two things to be true. And it also helps us to communicate with each other, because it's like, yeah, okay, you see things that I don't. Okay, cool. And I see things that you don't. Okay, cool. And you don't get all bent out of shape for it, because again, I think that they know, I think that the conservatives and the woke, they know that their ideas are fragile.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like with you with sexuality stuff. It's like, you know you're too fragile that you won't even step foot in a gay bar. You won't even watch a second of like a drag queen, because you might like it a little bit. And when it comes to politics and stuff like that, I think they know that there's holes in their arguments. They just don't want to be anywhere near those holes.
Dodge engagement. You know, and I think, and the people that follow me, it's so funny because I get this message a lot, and you probably do too. It's like, thank you for making me feel like I'm not a crazy person.
Yes, all the time.
Because you get gaslit from both sides. Like I even say this, like, I wanted to do a whole video in this. I probably should. Let me know if I should, everybody out there listening. It's like, I want to draw correlates between, because I worked as a relationship coach for a little while, and I worked people through, you know, like, especially, it was usually people that I had really a narcissistic relationship with someone. So I learned a lot about that. I was kind of fascinated with it. And so I kind of attracted people that had also gone through that same experience. And it's like, man, this is the relationship we have with journalism and the government and these institutions is so typical narcissist codependent relationship, like gaslighting, confusion, doubting your own reality. All these
things, like party loyalist people.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's like that, but also people that are trying to think it through, but they just can't. Like, it's so hard to find good information. So it's like, this is what's real, and then you look over here, like, this is what's real, and then everybody's full of shit. And it's like, well, that's not really what happened. And like with all the COVID stuff, like, people were losing their minds, and it's like, you're being gaslit at every step of the way, and that actually is very damaging for human just wellness, like mental wellness. And people, I even felt, I was like, am I crazy? Like, am I losing my mind? Because none of this makes any sense to me. And I think that was what drew people to me in a lot of ways. It was like, thank you for speaking about this in a rational way. Like, I posted that Botcha video I posted a reel of her talking, and she's like, you know, the vaccine saved millions and millions of lives. And I had a lot of people being like, no, it didn't save millions and millions of lives. And it might have. I don't know. Yeah. Maybe it was. There's a lot of unhealthy people. There's a lot of people that are obese and have other comorbidities, and there's a lot of elderly. There's millions and millions of elderly people that the value proposition was probably correct for them. I didn't feel that it was for me, but I don't need to, not my business.
Right.
I don't tell somebody how to live their life.
Again, right? you can say vaccine is good for this population and maybe not for this population.
So it probably on the global scale of 7.7 billion people probably saved millions and millions of lives. Don't know. Like, we won't know, because that's an alternate reality, right? In the multiverse, if you switch to another one where the vaccine was never invented, maybe we would know, but we won't know. So it's fine. And if somebody wants to say that, like, it's
well, they're also not studying. They don't have good data on who took the vaccine and who didn't, and then the long-term effects of it for clotting and
exactly
stuff like
what I'm saying.
So
people are needed to attach themselves to that. And they're like, you don't know. She actually doesn't know. No one really knows. She said a thing. Why are you focused on that? That wasn't a substantive piece of the conversation at any point anyways, but you found this thing that you need to like be upset about. So it's very strange.
So here's the thing, Connor. So this is naturally the way that you are. This is naturally the way that I am. It's like, if I'm going to learn basketball, though, I don't want to learn from LeBron, because it's like, what do I do? He's like, you just jump up and dunk it. What are you talking about? It's like, oh, that doesn't really help me. Yeah. Like, this comes very natural to us. But I think the goal here is, if we're going to try and, fix this culture war to some degree, or have some sort of, influence over it, is how do we get people to start to be willing to do this? And that's a lot of the stuff that I do. That's kind of my thing, because I'm a teacher. So I'm always trying to, like, here's tips for how to understand this stuff. And here's this. That's a lot of what my Instagram is like these how-to things to get people to just question, ponder, just get a little crack. But it's hard because it's so naturally the way that I am, and it is the way that you are, to someone who's not, but kind of wants to be. I think that's something that is worth addressing. How do you? So
I think, I talked about this earlier about Rogan's podcast and how I listen to people talk through their thought process. And I think I try and do that as well. Is I want to asking good questions, being curious, listening is a big part of that, right?
Long form.
Yeah. Long form. Like we're almost 2 hours in, right? Okay. So we've had a long form conversation, but also when I'm talking about, especially a very contentious argument, I like to share my thought process for getting to something. A lot of times it doesn't make it to Instagram, though, because things have to be a little shorter. But on the podcast, I do try and do that. And when I do that, actually, then it's like I'm opening up the kimono, right? Yeah. And I'm like, oh, hey, and then somebody's like, oh, well, you missed this here. Or, oh, I like the way you thought. And then so it's like, again, it's like now I'm not sharing my thoughts, I'm sharing my thought process, because it's hard for me to, again, it's like, I don't want to learn how to play basketball from LeBron. Right. I used to say the same thing about CrossFit. I was like, the worst people to teach adults how to do gymnastics are people who are really good at gymnastics and they did it as a child, because they don't know how to not do it. It's like asking me how to be tall. It's like, I don't have to, you know what I'm saying? Yep. So for me, it's like, it was a series of experiences, and a lot of it had to do with like questioning my own, a lot of questioning around, like, when your parents are addicts, it's very confusing. So you end up being very curious, or I don't know about anybody else's experience, but it's like, why is this drug more important than me? Right. That's an existential crisis as a 7-year-old, right? So it's like you end up with an embedded sense of depending on how you handle that, it can go a couple different ways, or it can be very bad, or maybe sometimes in my case, I feel like it's actually, I'm grateful for that experience, which I feel like I don't have a choice but to be grateful or resent it. So of those two options, I'll choose gratitude. But I think talking through out loud your thought process, and again, in the Patreon is really great for this too, because people get to ask me why I think what I think. And sometimes it takes somebody asking me that for me to share it, and then maybe get criticism on that and be receptive to that as well, because I'm looking at the life through my lens of experience, as are you, as is everybody else. And I've taken it upon myself to broaden my lens of experience and let more in, right? And then to kind of open up the filter a little bit and let more in, and then be okay with that. And that's comfortable for me. I can understand why it's uncomfortable for some people as well, but that's kind of my take on that.
Yeah. So it's modeling again. Yeah. I guess so. It'd be modeling the same way that I was talking about with religion or whatever it is modeling. And that's why I think like those simple things. I love those. Do you have Peter Boghossian and James Lindsay's book, How to Have Impossible Conversations?
No,
pretty good.
No.
And there's like
James Lindsay kind of turns me off a little bit.
Who?
James Lindsay.
I know. I mean, me too. I mean, he's a friend. Like he's been great. He has good ideas. I just don't. Again, we have very different approaches.
He made fun of somebody for being fat, and I was like, or something like whatever, and I was like, dude, you're a soft-bodied motherfucker.
Meat kettle. I think that there's like those things. Like, why do you think I think what I think? Just like, so I put that stuff out there because these are just questions you can start. Like, you only need a crack. I teach about during the hippie movement, LSD and stuff like that. I talk about the future bus. Timothy Leary and them, or Ken Kinsey, I guess it was. Yeah. And just driving around. They would drive around these small towns in like the early 1960s this bus rolls in and there's cannabis smoke rolling and the rock and roll, and people are just like, what is that? It's just like, I just want to crack. I want to put a little crack in your head about what you think is possible, or just something to grow. Jiu-jitsu is a great one for that too.
Normal even.
Yeah. Like, like 130 pound, high level black belt will just wrap up, a Division I football player. And it's like, how is this possible? It's like, well, maybe other things are possible too. So like, let's open this up a little bit. It gives you some. Or even thinking about like
getting strangled as like a form of like fitness or learning about your own vulnerability is like a weird kind of concept.
Once you open your mind up to that, then it can kind of go in a little bit. So I try to just ask those questions, put up memes or whatever that as someone's on the scroll hole in Instagram, they get to that and they go, huh.
Or you end up like Eddie Bravo and you think the earth is flat and you talk about Tower 7.
You could go off that deep end. But then he becomes closed-minded to like real data that says like it's not.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah, the towers, there's a lot of unanswered questions about 9/11. I do appreciate that. But the flat earth stuff, I'm like, I kind of draw the line there. But we had this conversation. Was it us that had the conversation about the flat earth stuff?
No.
It's like opening. Oh, it was at a panel or a table. I was like, the best thing about flat earth, and I will defend this till I'm blue in the face again, is like if you watch enough flat earth videos, it made you question whether or not the world was round. And one of the things people said, somebody asked me what I enjoyed about what I do. I was like, if I can make somebody consider changing their mind, even if they end up at the same conclusion, they've now ended up at that same conclusion with a stronger position and a more resilient 100%. Position. And the same thing, for about 5 minutes, I was like, maybe the earth is flat. And then I did some more digging. I was like, okay, this makes no sense.
Do you know Made by Jim Bob?
No.
The artist. He does like you've probably seen his art.
Yeah.
It's like all over but he is like, he doesn't believe that in like space, basically.
Space is fake?
Basically. You know, I mean, it's interesting. So he like NASA's all a conspiracy. And I had a conversation with him, and he's a smart guy. And it made me like, I didn't buy into it, but it made me go, wow, there's actually there are arguments here that aren't complete nonsense, even if the place he lands is nonsense. The arguments to get there, the process is actually like, wow, that's actually kind of interesting.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Yeah, I saw Neil deGrasse Tyson posted the last photo from a satellite that was basically drifting into Saturn and burns up. And it's like Saturn and the clouds and the rings around it. And I was like, oh my God, that's beautiful. And I was like, so many people think that is fake. And I was like, maybe it is fake.
Yeah, but then it's back to the gay bar and the drag queen thing. Is like, all right, I'm okay with like questioning that, and then I'll follow it along, and I'll take my stances. I have strong beliefs, loosely held.
Yeah,
and I think that's
strong beliefs. I love that statement.
Yeah, I think it's a good way to kind of approach it.
Well, man, this has been fun.
Yeah, this is awesome.
We did a great job. I think people will be satisfied with what they've been wanting it for so long, and doing it in person. Yeah, the world's better.
Yeah. Plus your setup here is awesome.
Yeah, we had a little better interview setup, but it's hard to get people all the way out of here.
Yeah.
But maybe when I'm as famous as Ben Greenfield, they'll come. When I build it, they will come, right?
Yeah.
Well, dude, where can everybody find you at?
So Instagram is the social media that I use. It's just my name, Will Reusch, WILLREUSCH. And then my podcast is Cylinder Radio. The idea is like a cylinder. So from this, it's a circle. From this, it's a rectangle. So, these ideas are nuanced. So you could take any controversial idea and you just flesh out the nuance of it and just like play with those ideas. So it's just right aligned with all the stuff we're talking about.
Perfect. Dude. It's been a blast hanging out with you this weekend. I've had a great time.
Yeah, man, for sure.